Chapter 43. Imo Tiange wasn't too familiar with this Qin Shi. Although he wasn't like Jiang Shanghang, who didn't interact with them at all. He had always been very cold. He rarely spoke when he was with them. Usually, he only focused on cultivating and rarely went out. He also didn't cause trouble. Among Yunwu sect's aura refining disciples, he wasn't eye-catching. As for cultivation level, although it wasn't easy for him to reach the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at his age, it wasn't that rare. As for diligence, as long as one was determined to cultivate, 6 or 7 out of 10 people would be as diligent as him. As for his background, he was just an individual cultivator from a destitute cultivation clan. There was really no reason to pay attention to him. If there was anything about him that made him stand out, it would be his handsome appearance. However, for a cultivator, this was not really a good point. For a cultivator, after cultivating, they would naturally be reborn, so they would not be ugly at all. Therefore, Imo Tiange didn't pay too much attention to Qin Shi, and she wasn't interested in studying his cultivation technique. It wasn't until now that she found out he actually cultivated body refining technique. The so-called body refining technique was also a branch of cultivation technique. Aside from the 5 elements in yin and yang, there were many cultivation techniques with special effects in this world, and body refining technique was one of them. This kind of cultivation technique could be traced back to the distant past era. At that time, when the world was just created, immortals, devils, humans, and beasts all lived together. In terms of cultivation, spiritual beasts were more blessed than humans because their bodies were tyrannical and didn't need magic weapons. After cultivating to a certain extent, they could withstand heavenly tribulations. Humans, on the other hand, needed magic weapons and other similar items to withstand heavenly tribulations, so body refining technique was born. When a tyrannical body was matched with a powerful magic weapon, heavenly tribulations were relatively easier to withstand. However, even in the distant past era, body refining technique was never the focus of cultivation, because humans were born weak. Cultivating body refining technique was far inferior to spiritual beasts. Moreover, there were many cultivators with great divine power in ancient times, so people often transcended heavenly tribulations and ascended. Now, however, it wasn't the case. Not to mention ascending, even those who cultivated to the nascent soul realm were few and far between. Heavenly tribulations weren't as powerful as they used to be. Moreover, excellent body refining technique was lost, so cultivators below the core formation realm almost didn't cultivate body refining technique. She really didn't expect this Qin Shi to also cultivate body refining technique. It seemed his talent was indeed outstanding, but she didn't know why he wasn't accepted by other cultivation groups. After looking for a while, she washed her hands and face, and went back the way she came. What kind of cultivation technique he practiced was his private matter. She couldn't be bothered to look into it. As soon as they returned, Morong Yen made a big fuss. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you actually took so long to wash your face," Imo Tiange said. "Senior Marshal sister, it's getting late. Aren't you going back yet?" Morong Yen looked at the color of the sky. It was already afternoon, so she was extremely reluctant to part. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, the next time you come out, you must call me." Imo Tiange nodded. N. Morong Yen took out a bag from her pocket and handed it to Imo Tiange. "Here, next time you call me, I'll give you something good." "Thank you, Senior Marshal sister." The reason she was willing to be ordered around by this Senior Marshal sister as a manservant was precisely because of this thing. Ever since Morong Yen found out about the characteristics of Imo Tiange's magic arts, she used seeds to seduce Imo Tiange. That was why Mo Tiange came to work as a manservant. Morong Yen had a senior marshal brother who worked in the group's medicinal garden, so it was very convenient for him to get seeds. Imo Tiange didn't have any connections, but someone was willing to help her, so she naturally seized the opportunity. In any case, she only needed to roast something. She could exchange it for a few bags of seeds that couldn't be bought. "Alright, I know it's because of this thing that you're willing to let me order you around. Alright, I'm going back." Morong Yen waved her hand at Imo Tiange. She wiped her hands clean and pretended to be a virtuous lady, before she leisurely walked away. Emotinga couldn't help but laugh as she watched Murong Yan's back. This was also where Senior Marshal's sister Murong was similar to Tianxiao. She obviously loved to play around, but she had no choice but to pretend to be a virtuous lady. Tianxiao, Emotinga probably wouldn't see her again in this lifetime. Yi Jingguan said that if she succeeded in her cultivation, she could naturally go back to see her relatives. But later, she realized it was best not to go back after separating from the secular world. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to accept the birth, death, and old age of her relatives. To avoid affecting her cultivation, since she'd already severed her ties with the secular world, it was better not to go back. With a faint sense of sadness, Emotinga returned to her room. There were several breaths in the other rooms. Presumably they were all cultivating. Emotinga also returned to her room and began to examine the seeds Murong Yin gave her these past few days. She recognized some seeds, but didn't recognize others. Most of them were seeds of medicinal plants. They didn't have any special uses and couldn't be used in fights of magical power. Her greenwood art was used to plant spiritual aura inside the seeds the moment they were sprouted. In a split second, those plants would grow and be used to attack. Therefore, seeds that didn't have any special uses or needed too much spiritual aura to grow also wouldn't work. This was the limit. Only some low-grade plants could be used to attack. After looking at some seeds, Emotinga really couldn't recognize them, so she got up and prepared to go to 10,000 Laws Pavilion. The so-called 10,000 Laws Pavilion was the place where Yunwu sect collected cultivation techniques. Sect disciples could go there once a month. According to their cultivation levels, they could choose some and bring them back. Ever since she entered the sect, Emotinga hadn't gone there, because she already had the art of Sinu for cultivation, and the greenwood art for fights of magical power. She didn't need to choose other cultivation techniques. Compared to other buildings, 10,000 Laws Pavilion's location was rather special. It was neither on the South Peak nor the North Peak. Instead, it was located in a remote valley between the two peaks. Emotinga searched for a while before she finally found the entrance by following the traces of a formation. It was a cave that didn't stand out at all. As soon as she approached the cave entrance, the formation at the entrance suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Emotinga didn't panic. Instead, she placed her identity tablet on an empty spot on the mountain wall, and the light immediately faded. The outermost formation of 10,000 Laws Pavilion could be entered as long as one had a disciple's identity tablet. After she stepped into the cave, she saw a very spacious hall inside. There were cave entrances with restrictions on 3 sides, but she didn't know where they led to. Moonstones illuminated the cave as bright as day. The inside of the cave was cool and dry. Emotinga didn't know whether this was the effect of a formation or not, but it wasn't only suitable for preserving jade slips. Some books made of paper or other materials could also be preserved. In the corner of the cave, there was a huge table. Behind the table sat several aura-refining cultivators with ordinary cultivation levels. Some of them were meditating, and some of them were dozing off with their heads tilted. Upon seeing her coming in, only one of them lazily raised his eyelids and said, "Identity tablet." Emotinga handed over her disciple's identity tablet. The man took it, and also took out a jade slip for her to leave her imprint on before he said, "Follow me." He walked to one of the cave entrances and flashed a jade slip. The jade slip emitted a ray of light, which fell on the restriction, and instantly disappeared. The man threw the jade slip to her. "The jade slip can't leave your body. You must come out before the Z hour. You're not allowed to keep any damaged items. If you need a duplicate, bring the jade slip here. You can make a maximum of 3 jade slips. Alright, you can go in now." Emotinga thanked him, then took the jade slip and entered the cave. This cave was a bit bigger than the hall outside. The front was densely packed with books, and in the back, aside from jade slips, there were all kinds of strange things. She walked over and flipped through the books first. She found that most of them were ordinary cultivation techniques, or were passed down in the mortal world. Presumably, the things recorded in these books weren't profound. Towards the back, there were things recorded on the cauldron. There was a piece of metal engraved with densely packed words. as well as a glass bead that seemed to have many words inside. These things were not ordinary. They were either alchemy techniques, mystical items, or special magical techniques. Emotienga first chose a jade slip called The Complete Guide to Spiritual Plants. Then she began to slowly look for useful things inside. She didn't need cultivation techniques, and she didn't have the energy to learn pill concocting, tool refining, and the like. Thus, she found a book called The Essence of Formations. Finally, she found a jade slip that recorded the history of Yunwu sect. When she went out, the disciple guarding the cave was a bit surprised. He asked, "You've already chosen?" It wasn't strange for him to be surprised. After looking at Emotienga's identity tablet, he knew she was a disciple who came here for the first time. Which disciple didn't choose something carefully during their first time in 10,000 Laws Pavilion, and spent a lot of time choosing something good? Unlike her, who came out after only an hour. Emotienga nodded, and handed over the jade tablet and 3 jade slips. "Sorry for troubling you, senior martial brother." The disciple took them and raised his chin at her. 3 spirit stones. Ah! Emotienga was dumbfounded. "Spirit stones?" The disciple said somewhat impatiently. "Junior martial brother, don't you know that copying jade slips requires spirit stones?" She indeed didn't know. However, copying a jade slip for 1 jade slip wasn't a lot, so she immediately took out the spirit stones and handed them over. The disciple took them and quickly copied the jade slips and handed them back to her. Emotienga took them and thanked him. Although 3 spirit stones wasn't a lot, ordinary aura refining disciples only got 5 spirit stones a month. If she came in every month to copy 3 jade slips, she'd be spending more than half of her spirit stones. Apparently, even if she entered a cultivation group, her days wouldn't be too good. Chapter 44. After returning from 10,000 Laws Pavilion, Emotienga once again entered closed-door meditation. First, she found the uses of the seeds Morong Yen gave her in the complete appraisement of spiritual plants, and found several of them were very useful. So she entered closed-door meditation to find the most suitable use for them. Second, she had been idle for a while and had a bottle of aura-converging pills, so it was time for her to continue cultivating. Of course, closed-door meditation for aura-refining cultivators like her wasn't like high-level cultivators who stayed in their practice rooms all the time. They had to eat, exercise, and take a bath. Therefore, Emotienga's so-called closed-door meditation was only when she spent all her time cultivating and didn't go out for a stroll. One of the seeds Morong Yen gave her was called bewitching flower, which was one of the raw materials for bewitching powder. Emotienga spent several days studying the spiritual aura of the seed thoroughly, and was finally able to make it sprout and bloom in an instant. The smell of this flower really had a bewitching effect. There was also a kind of fire thorn, which was much better than the ordinary thorn she had. Its innate talisman contained fire spiritual aura, so if one touched it unguarded, one would be burned. When she could skillfully use these 2 seeds and stabilized her 8th layer realm, she could be considered to have temporarily come out of closed-door meditation. At this time, she encountered the biggest problem. She had no money. In the secular world, it was difficult to move a single step without money. In the cultivation world, it wasn't much better. However, money wasn't gold or silver but spirit stones. Emotienga counted the things in her Qianquan bag. Aside from the spirit stones used to lay formations, and a bottle of temporarily unused aura-converging pills, there weren't many things that could be exchanged for money. The man from Enclan's spirit stones had long been used to buy medicinal pills. Their spirit tools couldn't be exchanged for money in the market square of Mount Yunwu. Otherwise, she would be in trouble. The only things left were some spiritual plants, tool refining materials, and a bead the size of a wine cup. After asking second uncle, Emotienga sold all the materials. As for the bead, even second uncle didn't know its use, so she just left it there. However, those 2 were aura refining cultivators, so the materials they carried weren't very good. She didn't exchange them for much and soon spent them all. Once again, she struggled to make a living. Because of her poor spiritual roots, she couldn't take medicinal pills, and had no choice but to use a spirit gathering formation. However, all of these required spirit stones. Otherwise, according to the sect's ration, she would need 3 aura-nourishing pills and 5 spirit stones a month. If she wanted to advance to the 10th layer, it would really take a long time. But other than formations, she didn't know anything else, and the money she earned from selling formations was only enough to treat second uncle's injuries. During another sermon, Su Jingji saw Emotienga moaning and groaning. After he asked for the reason, he asked her with astonishment, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, why didn't you go and get an errand? This is much better than finding your own way to make money." Ha! Emotienga was dumbfounded. Su Jingji sighed and earnestly instructed her. "Why do we have to risk our lives to enter a cultivation group? Isn't it precisely because the cultivation group has abundant resources? In addition to the monthly ration, the sect also has many errands for us to do, and these errands have other rewards. You see, I didn't cultivate much in the first 3 months. I ran errands everywhere and earned a lot of spirit stones, which allowed me to cultivate in seclusion for half a year without any worries." His words made Emotienga suddenly see the light. She actually forgot that cultivation group disciples had their own benefits and didn't need to think about seeking work outside. Emotienga patted her head a few times, then temporarily stopped cultivating and began to run errands. The so-called errands were missions given to disciples by the cultivation group. Some things were inconvenient for part-time disciples to do, so official disciples would be the ones to complete them. Once again, Emotienga entered the steward's hall. This was the second time she saw Marshal Uncle Yu in the courtyard's main hall. This Marshal Uncle Yu was cultivating again. On the other hand, there was another aura-refining disciple who was tidying up something on the side. Upon seeing her, this seemingly ordinary male disciple asked, "Are you going to hand it over or take it?" Emotienga pondered for a moment before she reacted. She said, "I'll have to trouble Senior Marshal Brother. I'm here to get an errand." The man extended his hand towards her. Identity tablet. Emotienga took out her identity tablet and handed it over. The man examined it and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the identity tablet before he threw her a jade slip. "The white ones are free as long as you meet the requirements." Emotienga inserted her divine sense into the slip, and all the errands appeared in her mind. These errands could basically be divided into several categories. The first was to guard the sect and other miscellaneous matters. The second was to go out and search for certain things. And the third was to guard the spirit stone mine and run a shop. The first type of errands were all quite popular. She could tell from the attitude of the guarding disciples in the 10,000 Laws Pavilion that day that the rewards were good, and the errands were in the sect. The second type of errands were rich, but they were more difficult and required luck. The third type of errands required her to spend a lot of time away from the sect. Emotienga didn't want to do this. Although she had a lot of time to cultivate, the outside world was certainly not as good as the spirit veins in the sect. In that case, she could only choose the first type. Emotienga looked up and said with a smile, "Senior Marshal Brother, I want to do this errand of collecting heavenly dew." Oh, the disciple glanced at her a few times. Because the reward for this errand wasn't high, and it was very complicated, few people were willing to do it. Of course, he wouldn't have any objections. He took out a jade slip, recorded something and handed it to her. "Okay, go to the North Peaks Xingyang Hall and look for Marshal Uncle Wang Xiao. He'll tell you what to do." Emotienga took the jade slip, thanked him, and went straight to the North Peak without stopping. In fact, how could she not want a better errand? However, after looking around, all the good ones were already taken. Although this one was a bit troublesome, in any case it was on the North Peak. The spiritual aura in the North Peak was rich, so spending some time cultivating there every day might be much better than cultivating in the South Peak. With the jade slip, her journey to the North Peak was smooth. The North and South Peaks of Mount Yunwu were several hundred feet apart, separated by an abyss. Aura-refining disciples couldn't fly in the air, so it would probably take more than half a day to go from the South Peak to the North Peak using light body technique. However, there was an expert senior who built an iron chain bridge between the two peaks, which greatly facilitated the disciples' travel. If they crossed the bridge, it would only take them a short while to reach the North Peak. As soon as she arrived at the North Peak, Mo Tiange felt that the spiritual aura here was several times denser than in the South Peak. Cultivating in this kind of place was much more effective. Moreover, the North Peak was heavily guarded. Not only were there foundation-building cultivators patrolling, but there were also extremely powerful formations and restrictions. With Mo Tiange's attainments in formations, she could only see that this formation was a set of Yunwu Sect's Great Mountain Protecting Formation. In short, it was a formation within a formation. According to common sense, the power of the formation inside the formation should be enough to split the mountains and split the seas. Mo Tiange found Zhengyang Hall and told the guarding disciple that she was looking for martial uncle Wang Qiao. The disciple pointed to a side hall. Mo Tiange walked over and looked around. Seeing that there was only a 10th layer aura refining disciple inside, she couldn't help but feel strange. This disciple was a female cultivator. She was also about 20 years old and had a beautiful appearance. Most female cultivators weren't that ugly. As cultivators, they naturally had some different ways to beautify themselves. In addition, their bodies had spiritual aura, so their skin was naturally fair and bright. The female disciple turned around and asked, "Who are you? What's the matter?" Mo Tiange hastily greeted her and said, "Senior Martial Sister, I received the errand of collecting heavenly dew and came to look for Martial Uncle Wang." "Oh, you can come in. I'm his disciple. Just tell me." Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange handed the jade tablet she received to her. The disciple examined it and smiled. "So it's Junior Martial Brother Yi. My name is Wang Qiani. In the future, you can just tell me about this errand." Her surname was also Wang. Judging from her tone, her relationship with Martial Uncle Wang wasn't shallow. Mo Tiange answered, "Yes. Senior Martial Sister, can you tell me what to do?" Wang Qiani took out several jade bottles and handed them to her. Heavenly dew is dew that hasn't dried yet and contains spiritual aura in the early morning. Every day at the hour of the Yin and Mao, go to the forest to collect dew and bring it here when it's full. Remember, I want the dew on clean spirit grass, nothing else. Got it? Mo Tiange took the jade bottles and asked, "How many bottles do I need to collect per day?" Wang Qiani smiled. "It's already good enough if you can collect 1 bottle per day. How many bottles? Just go and give them to me every day at the hour of the Mao. I'll give you as many as you have." Chapter 45. When Mo Tiange first heard the requirement to collect heavenly dew, it seemed quite simple. She even muttered, "Why didn't they ask a part-time disciple to do it?" It was only after she went there herself that she realized it wasn't simple. There were many flowers and trees with spiritual energy, but there were few spiritual herbs. Moreover, only dew with spiritual energy could be called heavenly dew. Often spiritual herbs grew on cliffs, so one had to fly up and down to collect them. After busying herself for 4 hours, she only managed to gather less than half a bottle. Seeing that the sun had already risen, she shook her head helplessly and gave the jade bottle containing the heavenly dew to Wang Qiani. Seeing that Wang Qiani was satisfied with the bottle Mo Tiange brought, Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. She then left Jingyang Hall and returned to the South Peak. This errand wasn't difficult at all. As for the income, she could earn about 12 spirit stones a month, which could be exchanged for 5 or 6 aura-nourishing pills. However, these medicinal pills were still a drop in the bucket for Mo Tiange. Therefore, after asking Su Jingji, she went to the steward's hall to ask if there were any other errands she could do at the same time. Now that she thought about money, Mo Tiange felt like her head was about to explode. In the past, second uncle always took care of everything for her, so she basically didn't need to worry about it. Later on, when second uncle was injured, she stopped taking pills and was barely able to get by. But now that she wanted to break through to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, money became her biggest problem. Aside from Su Jingji, who earned a lot of spirit stones some time ago, the others living with her also started to get busy with this matter. Louis Dao was the same as Mo Tiange. He went out early and came back late every day. Jiang Shanghang said it was best for them not to go out, but without medicinal pills to cultivate, he couldn't care about anything else. Qin Shi, on the other hand, was quite good. Because he had some knowledge about concocting medicinal pills, a martial uncle in the North Peak took him away. In total, Emotienga accepted 3 errands. Even when senior marshal's sister Morong came to look for her to play, she didn't respond. After being so busy for several months, Emotienga finally stopped making money, because Yunwu's sect made a public announcement. All the aura refining disciples gathered in the square. Over 1,000 people were completely silent. Not long after, a person walked out of the real treasure hall. It was the sect leader Fong Dingyue, followed by several foundation building cultivators. Disciples, I've gathered all of you here today to tell you something. In order to test our disciples, Jindao School and Zixia sect invited us to fight against Yunwu sect. I've already accepted their challenge. This time, all disciples above the 7th layer of the aura refining realm must participate. 1 month later, they will enter Miwu Valley for 3 days. The winner will be rewarded handsomely. As for the specifics, the disciple in charge will explain it to you in detail. Disciples, for the sake of Yunwu sect's reputation, I hope you'll spare no effort. In the square, all the disciples whispered to each other. Some of the more experienced disciples who had experienced such things shook their heads and explained to the new disciples. On Emotienga's side, aside from senior martial brother Zhou, the others hadn't been in the sect for more than a year. Only a few of them had heard about it and told them about it. As it turned out, in the vicinity of Yunwu sect, there were 2 cultivation groups with similar strength, Jindao School and Zixia sect. These 3 cultivation groups stood like a tripod in this area. All resources and spirit veins had to be shared with the other 2 cultivation groups. The 3 sects rose and fell. If one of them became stronger, they would want to get a bigger share of the resources. However, they were also afraid that the conflict would be too intense, and all 3 would be injured. In the end, they thought of a way to compete without losing their strength. This was the origin of Miwu Valley's challenge. The so-called Miwu Valley was a valley between the monasteries of the 3 cultivation groups. The valley was filled with dense fog, so ordinary people couldn't enter. The seniors of the 3 cultivation groups laid restrictions and formations in this valley, so that their disciples could enter and compete with each other. The one who persisted until the end would be the winner. The sect head's voice once again rang out. Disciples in this competition, the disciple who persisted until the end will receive a high-grade spirit tool, 2 bottles of aura-converging pills, and 100 spirit stones. In addition, according to the number of people defeated, you will receive spirit stones as a reward. Even if you fail halfway, you will still receive spirit stones as a reward. Alright, supervising disciple, take the disciple under control back and explain everything in detail. In half a month, the challenge will begin. Emotienga, who was filled with questions, followed everyone back to their residence. Senior martial brother Zhou called everyone to gather in the courtyard and once again explained the matter of Miwu Valley. As it turned out, for the sake of this competition, the seniors of the 3 cultivation groups placed restrictions on every disciple's identity tablet. As long as the identity tablet was hung on the disciple's body, there wouldn't be any life-threatening danger. Once the identity tablet left the body, the person would be teleported away in an instant, and the person who was teleported away would be considered to have failed. Miwu Valley was very big. Once you entered, there would be the danger of encountering spiritual beasts. However, this could also be regarded as an additional reward. The spiritual beasts and spiritual plants inside would belong to the disciple who participated in the competition. Emotienga carefully calculated and couldn't help but become interested in this competition in Miwu Valley. If she persisted until the end, there would be 2 bottles of aura-converging pills, and each bottle contained 10 pills. She already had 1 bottle, which contained 30 aura-converging pills, which would be enough for her to advance to the 9th layer of the aura-refining realm. If she was lucky, she might even be able to advance to the 10th layer. Even if she didn't persist until the end, there would still be spirit stones as a reward. Moreover, there wouldn't be any life-threatening danger, so it was completely worth the risk. Right now, whenever she saw spirit stones and medicinal pills, her eyes would shine. She really couldn't miss this opportunity. With such a generous reward, The others were naturally the same. Seeing how excited they were, Senior Marshall Brother Zhou let out a humph and poured cold water on them. Junior Marshall Brothers, do you think this reward is so easy to obtain? The transporting formation in Miwu Valley will teleport you to a random place in the valley. If you happen to be teleported to the mouth of a spiritual beast, you'll be teleported out. In addition, the terrain in the valley is complicated and dangerous. You might walk into the midst of enemies while you're walking. Therefore, after you enter Miwu Valley, the first thing you must do is find a safe place to rendezvous with your fellow disciples. You won't be able to persist for a long time by relying on your own strength. Once everyone heard this, they calmed down a bit. Someone asked, Senior Marshall Brother Zhou, you're also going, right? Senior Marshall Brother Zhou nodded. Yes, I'm also an aura refining disciple, so I naturally have to go. Everyone here is in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm or above, so everyone has to go. To tell you the truth, the last time we competed was more than 10 years ago. At that time, I was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, but I didn't even last for a day before I was besieged and forced out. Therefore, you mustn't lower your guard. They were more or less clear about Senior Marshall Brother Zhou's strength. Usually, Senior Marshall Brother Zhou was responsible for explaining to them the difficulties they encountered in their cultivation. It could be said that Senior Marshall Brother Zhou's realm was much higher than theirs. Now that even Senior Marshall Brother Zhou said this, everyone couldn't help but suppress their excitement and think about the opportunities and difficulties involved. Senior Marshall Brother Zhou chuckled. You don't need to be so worried. Even if you come out very quickly, you won't lose anything. Just do your best. Buy some talismans or something to protect yourself, or form a small team with others. The transporting formation can teleport up to 5 people at the same time, so it'll be best if all 5 of you can gather together. Alright, go and prepare yourselves. Senior Marshall Brother Zhou waved his hand and left. Everyone else went back to their respective rooms while discussing their own plans. Once they returned to their rooms, Louis Dao asked, Junior Marshall Brothers, what are your plans? Su Jingji said, of course we'll go together. Senior Marshall Brother Liu, that transporting formation can teleport up to 5 people at the same time, so we'll be in the same room. As he spoke, he glanced at Jiang Shanghang. Unexpectedly, Jiang Shanghang didn't walk away, nor did he express any objections. Apparently, he also knew he wouldn't be able to go alone this time. Louis Dao nodded. I also think so. Junior Marshall Brothers, what do you think? Mo Tinga said, I have no objections. Of course, staying with Senior Marshall Brothers will be safer. Qin Shi also nodded. Everyone looked at Jiang Shanghang. His expression was still stiff, but in the end he nodded. Alright. Louis Dao was quite happy. This was the first time everyone worked together. That being the case, let's discuss what we should do this time. Junior Marshall Brothers. Chapter 46. Mo Tiange was both excited and depressed about this trip to Miwu Valley. She was excited because if she could persist until the end, she would be rewarded handsomely and wouldn't have to worry about medicinal pills for a long time. She was depressed because she would have to spend the spirit stones she earned in the last 2 to 3 months. She bought some talismans, asked Morong Yen to get some seeds, and prepared some temporary formations. She had almost used up all the spirit stones she had. During this time, the 5 people in the same room became closer than ever. They kept each other informed about what they were going to do, and what they were going to do. They planned to win in one fell swoop in this trip to Miwu Valley. Mo Tiange was naturally happy to see some of them working together. But she wouldn't put all her hopes on her companions. She spent all the spirit stones she had. Even if she couldn't persist until the end, she still had to get some rewards in order to not suffer a loss. A month passed in the blink of an eye. All the aura refining disciples in the 7th layer and above gathered in the square again. This time, aside from the sect head, there were also 2 core formation cultivators in the square. Yunwu sect only had 1 nascent soul cultivator and 7 or 8 core formation cultivators. This time, the sect head and 2 core formation cultivators showed up together. Disciples, don't talk nonsense. Today is the day of the competition between the 3 cultivation groups in Miwu Valley. I presume you already know about this matter, so I won't repeat it. However, there's one thing I want to tell you. To encourage the disciples, the sect has decided that the 3 disciples who win the most victories will be rewarded with an additional 500 spirit stones and a bottle of ore converging pills. The sect head's words caused an uproar in the square. 500 spirit stones. Ordinary aura refining disciples only earned 5 spirit stones a month, and ordinary errands only earned about 10 spirit stones a month. Mo Tienga had been busy for several months and almost didn't have time to cultivate, but she only earned about 100 spirit stones. Ordinary ore converging pills cost 2 spirit stones each, while ore converging pills cost 25 spirit stones each. 500 spirit stones were completely enough to cover the rewards for persisting until the end, not to mention the additional bottle of ore converging pills. Mo Tienga was very excited. 500 spirit stones and a bottle of ore converging pills. If she could persist until the end and obtain those 2 bottles of ore converging pills, she could completely focus on closed-door meditation until the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard someone coughing. Mo Tienga immediately calmed down. Only the top 3 would receive this reward. She herself was only in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Not to mention, there was more than one foundation building cultivator, like Senior Marshal Brother Zhou. Besides, there were at least 100 disciples, whose cultivation levels were higher than hers. Her chances of getting into the top 3 were indeed very slim. At this moment, the sect leader and the other 2 core formation cultivators exchanged a few words. The 3 of them spread out and took out their magic treasures. It was a giant tortoise, a boat, and a square handkerchief that was spread out over an acre of land. The sect leader shouted, "Disciples in charge, bring your disciples here." Senior Marshal Brother Zhou gathered the 20 or so disciples together and said, "Junior Marshal Brothers, we're going to Miwu Valley now. We've said everything we need to say, so let's do our best." After he finished speaking, he led everyone forward and lined up to board the small boat in the middle. When the several hundred disciples all boarded the 3 flying magic weapons, the core formation grandmasters controlled their respective magic weapons. In an instant, the 3 magic weapons soared into the sky and flew forward at an extremely fast speed. The aura refining disciples on the magic weapons were all amazed. Flying magic weapons. Aura refining disciples could only use the light body technique. Only those who reached the foundation building realm could use spirit tools or magic weapons to fly. However, only core formation magic weapons could carry so many people at such a fast speed. She didn't know whether any of the people on the flying magic weapons today would be able to advance into the core formation realm. It should be known that in a medium cultivation group like Yunwu sect, only one core formation cultivator would appear every 100 years. Maybe none of them would be able to advance into the core formation realm. Mo Tienga kept her lament to herself. Among these disciples, there was no lack of talented people, but even they weren't sure they could advance to the core formation realm, let alone her. The speed of these flying magic weapons was extremely fast. The sect head steered the tortoise spiritual beast to fly in the front, while the others followed closely behind. About 4 to 6 hours later, their speed finally slowed down, and they slowly descended. Mo Tienga lowered her head and looked down. There was a mountain with a flat top next to a misty canyon. There were already a lot of people parked on the mountain. They were cultivators wearing yellow clothes and purple clothes. Apparently, they were the disciples of Jindao School and Zixia sect. When all of them landed, the sect head and the other 2 core formation grandmasters put away their magic weapons and walked towards the center of the mountain, where several core formation cultivators were already waiting. After they greeted each other, the sect head said, "Brother Jean and Brother Li are so impatient. They arrived so early." Those 2 people were presumably the sect heads of Jindao School and Zixia sect. The one called Brother Jean was relatively young. He seemed to be in his early 30s, but it was unclear whether he had taken look-preserving pills or similar medicinal pills. The other person was much older than sect head Fong. His hair and beard were already grizzled. Apparently, his lifespan wasn't very long. The younger person let out a humph and said in a rather unhappy manner, "Brother Fong, you're just too confident. My Jingdao school's strength isn't good enough, so we came early to prepare." Mo Tiange had heard that Jingdao school had internal strife 100 years ago. Currently, their strength hadn't recovered yet. Presumably, this school head Jin was dissatisfied with the competition in Miwu Valley. After all, if their disciples weren't good enough, they would have to share the profits. The old man surnamed Li, on the other hand, had his eyes half closed and was calm and composed. He said, "Brother Fong, long time no see." Apparently, this person was the sect head of Zixia sect. This competition was proposed by Zixia sect. It was said that Zixia sect was the opposite of Jingdao school. In the past 100 years, they had accepted many good disciples. Seeing that they were even stronger than Jingdao school and Yunwu sect, they couldn't help but want a share of the profits. Mo Tiange wanted to continue watching, but Louis Dao patted her shoulder and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, let's get together." Mo Tiange turned her head and uttered a yes. The disciples of the three groups were all on this mountain. Some were meditating, and some were whispering to each other. The five of them found a place with fewer people, and sat down in a circle. Louis Dao said cautiously, "Junior Marshal Brothers, I have to emphasize something first. The five of us are traveling together and cooperating with each other. We have to share our hearts with each other. We can't just say what we mean and ruin other people's futures." The others all nodded. This was the basic requirement of cooperation. Otherwise, if they couldn't trust each other, how could they travel together? Louis Dao continued to emphasize, "Hang your identity tablets properly. Putting them in your Qinquan bag is useless." The others checked their identity tablets and confirmed there were no problems. Louis Dao continued to say, "Let's make this clear first. We'll cooperate to defeat the enemy, and we'll divide the identity tablets equally. If there isn't enough, we'll divide them according to the role they played in the fight. We mustn't argue about this. If we have any objections, we'll discuss it properly. What do you guys think?" Su Jingji agreed. "Of course, now that we're in Miwu Valley, we're companions. If we argue, other people will take advantage of us." Mo Tiange also nodded. The other two also didn't object. Seeing this, Louis Dao happily said, "That's all I wanted to say. Do any of you have any questions?" For this trip to Miwu Valley, everyone tacitly agreed that Louis Dao would be the leader. They all expressed that they would let him make the decisions. Right after they finished speaking, several sect heads gathered in one place and said in unison, "Disciples, gather. The competition is about to begin." Chapter 47. With the three sect heads working together, a transporting formation suddenly appeared in midair above the mountaintop. This was Mo Tiange's first time seeing a transporting formation. Although she studied formations, the scale of a transporting formation wasn't inferior to that of a great mountain protecting formation. Her current attainments in formations were far from enough. The circular transporting formation in front of her was covered with profound cloud patterns and spirit stones. The whole formation shone brightly and emitted a mysterious aura. She stared fixedly at the transporting formation, trying to comprehend its meaning. All formations were interpreted according to the yin and yang of the world, the 5 elements, and the 8 trigrams, but she couldn't understand the meaning of these complicated 8 trigrams patterns. Mo Tiange sighed. It wasn't that her attainments in formations weren't high enough, but there were some things she couldn't understand in her current realm. Perhaps she could only understand them after advancing to the foundation building realm, or even the core formation realm, or nascent soul realm. Once the formation appeared, the disciples scrambled to be the first to be transported. If the elders of the sect weren't here, there might have been some conflicts. A moment later, it was finally their turn. With a flash of white light, the 5 of them disappeared into the transporting formation. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and couldn't help but feel astonished. What was this place? At that moment, the others also opened their eyes to observe their surroundings. They all frowned. The place they were in was surrounded by rock walls and a long and narrow passage. It seemed to be a cave. "Where is this?" Su Jingji asked while looking around. "We won't be transported to a spiritual beast's cave, right?" As soon as he said that, Everyone else's expressions changed. Yes, this place indeed looked like a cave. Maybe it was the habitat of a spiritual beast. If that was the case, they really hit the jackpot. They didn't need to encounter the disciples of the other two cultivation groups. This spiritual beast would give them a good beating. Louis Dao calmed down first and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Su is right. We'd better be careful." The five of them observed for a while, then chose a direction, summoned their spirit tools or protective spells, and cautiously moved forward. However, they didn't know what kind of spiritual beast's cave it was. There were many forks in the road. The five of them walked back and forth, bypassing several dead ends, but they couldn't find the exit and didn't encounter any spiritual beasts. They gradually lost their way. This cave was simply like a maze. No matter where they went, their surroundings didn't change at all. Even the rock walls had the same pattern. After walking for nearly an hour, everyone finally lost their patience. Su Jingji took the lead and said, "We can't get out of here like this." Even Jiang Shanghang had an impatient expression on his face. Mo Tiange also felt a hint of irritation in her heart. This scenery was indeed unchanging, which made her feel annoyed. After pondering for a long time, Louis Dao said, "How about we split up and look for the way?" The few of them hesitated. If they split up, what would they do if they encountered spirit beasts? "Let's split up then." Mo Tiange finally made up her mind and said, "We don't know whether this is a spiritual beast's cave or not. Maybe it's just an underground karst cave? If we keep going around like this, who knows when we'll end up? Why don't we split up and explore the way?" "Yes," Su Jingji said. "I agree with Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Even if we really encounter some danger, we can just treat it as us coming here to broaden our horizons. We won't lose anything." Seeing that no one objected, Louis Dao said, "That being the case, should we split into 2 or 3 groups? It might be safer if we split into 2 groups, but it'll be faster if we split into 3 groups. Qin Shi said, "Since we've decided to split up, let's split into 3 groups." "Alright, if we split into 3 groups, I'll take 1 group. Junior Marshal Brother Jiang and Junior Marshal Brother Qin. The 2 of you will take 1 group each." Louis Dao arranged the groups this way because among the 5 of them, he, Jiang Shanghang, and Qin Shi were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, while Su Jingji and Mo Tiange were in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. This way, they wouldn't be defeated too quickly if they encountered danger. It could be said that Louis Dao would suffer the most if he went alone, so the others didn't have any objections. "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Lu." Qin Shi thanked him, then turned towards Mo Tiange and Su Jingji. "Junior Marshal Brothers, who will go with me?" Mo Tiange and Su Jingji glanced at each other. Su Jingji then said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you go with Senior Marshal Brother Qin. I'll go with Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." He then winked at her. Mo Tiange understood what he meant. She saved Jiang Shanghang last time, but he didn't appreciate it at all. Su Jingji knew she hated Jiang Shanghang, so he told her to go with Qin Shi. Mo Tiange also knew Su Jingji's relationship with Jiang Shanghang was a bit better than hers, so she didn't refuse and nodded. Okay. The 5 of them split into groups and set off in different directions. The road was still like a maze with unchanging rock walls. Mo Tiange walked with Qin Shi for a while. There were several dead ends, but she still marked them according to the method she used just now. However, it still didn't work. This went on for another half an hour. Mo Tiange started to feel a bit impatient. She became more and more certain that this wasn't a spiritual beast's cave. It might be a maze set up by the seniors of the 3 cultivation groups. Spiritual beasts simply didn't have the ability to create a maze like this, so they couldn't even tell which direction was inside. At this moment, Qin Shi suddenly turned around and glanced at her. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, guard your mind." Mo Tiange was startled. She realized she was about to be controlled by her impatience. She was shocked and hastily guarded her dantian with aura. Only then did her mind become clear. She couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. "Thank you for reminding me, Senior Marshal Brother. It seemed this maze wasn't that simple. When one was inside, one's mind would unconsciously become unstable. This way, when one encountered danger, it would be very easy to make mistakes. What in the world is this?" Qin carefully looked at the surrounding rock walls and asked, Junior Martial Brother Yi, do you know the Tao of formations? Emotinga nodded. I know a thing or two. Then, don't you think this looks like a formation? Emotinga had long felt this way, so she immediately said, yes, everywhere here is exactly the same. It seems like there's no end to it. It's very much like a maze. However, if this is a formation, the cultivation level of the person who said it must be above the foundation building realm. From what I know, it'll be very difficult to break it. Qin wasn't disappointed. He said, I've indeed heard that Miwu Valley used to be a place for closed-door meditation before the competition took place. Maybe this is a formation left behind by those seniors. Oh, this was Emotinga's first time hearing this. She asked curiously, Senior Martial Brother Qin, where did you hear this? Qin, she said, a martial uncle in the North Peak told me about it. I only heard him mention it. However, because the spirit veins here were getting worse, and the fog was getting thicker, people gradually stopped coming here. Later, the three cultivation groups found this valley again, in order to find a place for the competition. In that case, when they chose the place for the competition, they should have carefully examined it. Why did they still leave this formation here? Maybe it's because it's too hidden, or maybe they thought this formation could be used as part of the competition. This was indeed possible. Emotinga didn't say anything more. She continued to carefully examine it with Qin step by step. Even if it was a formation laid by a high-level cultivator, there must be a formation eye. As long as they found it, they could easily get out. Chapter 48. Emotinga paused and carefully looked at the rock wall for a long time. She also touched the surface of the rock wall. Qin stopped beside her. What's wrong? Emotinga carefully observed for a while, then said, there's something wrong here. Upon hearing that, Qin walked closer and saw that the rock wall was still covered with irregular natural patterns. Upon seeing his doubtful gaze, Emotinga pointed at the patterns and said, do you remember what the other patterns look like? Qin shook his head. I'm not proficient in formations, so I can't tell. Emotinga said, it seems meaningless, but in fact there's a vague layer of magic on it. It's actually the position of the 8 trigrams. 8 trigrams? Qin frowned. You're saying the problem is on this rock wall? Emotinga nodded. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, this is the 8 gates life and death formation of the Chiman Duanjia. 8 gates life and death formation. Qin frown deepened. He muttered to himself and suddenly said, then, can we leave this formation if we find the life gate and the opening gate? In theory, that's right, Emotinga said. But in reality, it's not so absolute. Because in high-level formations, the 8 gates can even change, and are difficult to grasp. I've only seen some clues about this formation now, so it's obviously not simple. I'm not sure whether we can find the life gate or not. No matter what, we have to try. Emotinga nodded. Yes, failure is better than being trapped here. It can't be considered a victory if we don't get a single identity tablet. After carefully examining it, she said, this is the Zhen position. It seems to be the pain gate, which has the wood attribute. I practice a wood attribute cultivation technique. Let me try. Qin stood in front of the rock wall. Emotinga stood in front of the rock wall, took out her greenwood sword, poured spiritual aura into it, and suddenly controlled it to rush towards the rock wall. The moment the sword collided with the rock wall, a layer of light appeared on the rock wall, blocking the attack of the greenwood sword. Seeing this, Emotinga mobilized all the spiritual aura in her body and rushed forward without backing down. The layer of light was finally pierced by the sword and disappeared without a trace. The moment the greenwood sword touched the rock wall suddenly exploded. Suddenly, the scenery changed, and they were standing in front of another rock wall. It was as if everything that had just happened was an illusion, and the rock wall was undamaged. A smile appeared on Emotinga's face. The gate of pain has been broken. This is the Li position, the Li Palace's gate of view, a position of fire. She wrinkled her brows in embarrassment. I'm not proficient in fire spells. I can only cast a few fireballs. What about you, Senior Brother Qin? Qin, she said. I mainly cultivate metal and fire elements, so I'll do it. Emotinga felt relieved and took a step back. She watched as Qin took out a sword from his Qingkuan bag and unsheathed it. Upon seeing this sword, Emotinga couldn't help but feel somewhat astonished. This sword's entire body was golden, and within the flames, its aura was astonishing. Compared to her greenwood sword, it was unknown how many times more imposing it was. It was actually a magical treasure. It wasn't that she hadn't seen magic treasures before. The spirit-concealing jade pendant Yi Jingwen gave her to conceal her constitution was precisely a magic treasure. More than half a year ago, when she killed that man from An Clan, the enchanting lantern she obtained was also a magic treasure. However, aside from concealing one's aura and purifying spiritual aura, that spirit-concealing jade pendant didn't have any other effects. That enchanting lantern was an illusion-inducing magic treasure. It looked ordinary and unremarkable, unlike the sword in front of her, which had a threatening aura. Qin moved his spiritual aura and swung his sword in a very ordinary manner. However, with a rumbling sound, the defensive spell on the rock wall was destroyed without any resistance. The rock wall exploded, and the two of them returned to the scene they were in before. Qin sheathed the sword, then glanced at her. It wasn't easy for me to obtain this sword. If other people found out about it, I wouldn't have a day of peace. I hope Junior Marshal Brother Yi can help me conceal this and not tell other people. Emotinga was very clear about what a flying sword magic weapon represented. If she took out the enchanting lantern in her hand, countless cultivators would covet it, let alone this sword. It was no wonder that Qin never took out this sword in front of other people. An ordinary man was innocent, but treasuring a jade ring was a crime. If other people found out about this, how could a small aura-refining cultivator keep such a magic weapon? Emotinga nodded in understanding. Rest assured, Senior Marshal Brother Qin. We can only escape if we work together. Once we leave this place, I'll just pretend I didn't see anything today. Qin showed a faint smile, but this smile made Emotinga dumbfounded. She had known him for a long time, but she had never seen him smile. He was originally handsome, but when he smiled, he looked even more graceful and handsome, making people unable to look away. It wasn't until she saw his questioning expression that Emotinga hastily withdrew her gaze, feeling annoyed in her heart. Really? It's not like I've never seen a man before. I've disguised myself as a man and mingled with men for a long time, but I'm actually staring at a man in a daze. To cover up her gaffe, she hastily looked at the pattern on the rock wall. DUI shock gate metal element. Qin stepped forward. I'll do it. It was still the same sword, but it was covered with a layer of golden aura. Qin stimulated the spiritual aura on it, and a moment later, the shock gate was broken. This time, Emotinga was overjoyed. Because the rock wall in front of them was different, the surrounding rock walls moved one after another. In a flash, the passage between the rock walls turned into a stone room. The two of them cast defensive spells and cautiously walked in. This stone room was very high and very spacious. There was only a shelf in the corner with a few things on it. Emotinga looked around the shelf, but she couldn't see any traces of formations or restrictions. Finally, she picked up a book made of animal skin. Chimenduanjia. She opened it. Sure enough, it was a book describing formations. Qin, who was holding the other book, let out a cry of surprise. Emotinga looked at him. What's wrong? Qin waved the book at her and said, This golden body art is a high-level body refining art from our school. I've inquired about it. This art is placed in the most secret room of 10,000 Laws Pavilion. It's said that only grandmasters in the core formation realm, or above, can read it. Emotinga remembered that he also cultivated body refining art. It seemed he was indeed very interested in this book. Qin flipped through the book and said to her, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, this book is very useful to me. This book belongs to me, and the rest belongs to you. What do you think? This body refining art wasn't very useful to Emotinga. On the contrary, the formation book in her hand was no less useful to her than Qin's body refining art. She originally thought that even if all these things belonged to Qin, she would still exchange this book. Now that Qin was willing to give up other things, she naturally wouldn't disagree. In addition to these 2 books, there were several other books, jade slips and 2 jade bottles. Among them, there was a pill concocting book, and the others were cultivation notes. The medicinal pills in the jade bottles weren't any good. They were just spirit cleansing pills. Some medicinal pills would leave behind pill poison after being eaten, and these spirit cleansing pills were used to remove pill poison, so they weren't valuable. Emotienga swept all the things into her Qianquan bag without any guilt. What is this place? Why does it seem like it was deliberately set up to reward us? Qin, she said. It might really be left behind by the elders of the school. These things aren't important to them. So it seems they were meant to reward the disciples, who broke the formations. As they spoke, sounds came from outside the stone room. It seemed like someone was coming this way. Emotienga and Qin glanced at each other. They each took out their spirit tools, cast defensive spells, and stared at the door of the stone room. At that moment, the sound of the door became clear. Several cultivators dressed in yellow clothes broke in. Chapter 49. They were Jindao School's disciples. There were 5 of them in total, 2 in the 10th layer, 1 in the 9th layer, and 2 in the 8th layer. Emotienga frowned. With the special effect of greenwood art, she could protect herself against 2 or 3 cultivators with similar cultivation levels, but if there were more than 3, she didn't know how many Qin she could handle. At that moment, Qin put away his sword and said in a low voice, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, leave the 2 10th layer aura refining cultivators to me. You try to trap the others." Emotienga nodded. Whether it was greenwood art or formation she was good at, they were good at trapping, not killing. If she had to fight the other 3, she really wouldn't have any confidence, but it would be much easier to trap them temporarily. Qin went to meet them. Sure enough, when the other party saw that his cultivation level was also in the 10th layer, the 2 10th layer cultivators both rushed forward and controlled their spirit tools to attack him. Since the Immortals' assembly, Emotienga hadn't seen Qin fight. However, he was very proficient in the use of spells and practiced body refining techniques, so he was suitable for fights of magical power. Presumably, he was stronger than ordinary 10th layer aura refining cultivators. She didn't have time to deal with Qin because 2 of the other 3 people rushed towards her. Emotienga took a step back and used her footwork to dodge the 2 people's attacks. She then took out her greenwood sword and hovered in the air to restrain them while sprinkling seeds in her hand. The 2 people didn't know what the seeds in her hand were, so they chose to dodge. But in the next moment, they discovered that when the seeds fell near their feet, they immediately grew thorns. These thorns glowed red, and as soon as they touched them, they immediately felt a burning pain. Taking advantage of the fact that they couldn't react, Emotienga threw out another handful of seeds. The fire thorns once again grew, forming a simple spirit-trapping formation that surrounded them. The seeds that flew after her suddenly turned into a huge white flower the moment they touched them. The flower's petals bloomed, releasing a tempting fragrance. The 2 people suddenly felt dizzy and couldn't summon their spiritual aura. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief. She took back her greenwood sword and stared at the only person left. That person originally thought that 2 cultivators in the same realm as her would be enough to deal with a mere 8th layer aura refining cultivator. He didn't expect that he would be trapped by her in an instant, so he immediately controlled his spirit tool to attack her. This person had sharp eyes. Once he saw Emotienga's technique, he immediately used light body technique to fight her in the air. His figure changed in the air, so he couldn't set up a temporary formation or use the thorns to trap him. He only had to face her bewitching flowers and the greenwood sword. This was also Emotienga's shortcoming in fights of magical powers. By the time she advanced to the foundation building realm, fights of magical powers between cultivators would take place in the air. Thorns and the like would no longer be of any use, and greenwood art could only stimulate plants that grew for a short period of time. Those things basically had no effect on foundation building cultivators. The person in front of her was flying in the air, using the light body technique, which made her verdant wood incantation useless. For a moment, the situation was deadlocked. Emotinga took a look at the spirit trapping formation and wrinkled her brows. The spirit trapping formation she laid on the spot could only trap people for a while. It would be terrible if it dragged on. Thinking of this, he took out a talisman from his bosom, intending to end the battle as soon as possible. Unexpectedly at this moment, the person opposite him let out a cry of surprise and anger. Emotinga turned around and saw Qinshi reaching out his hand to catch something. There was only one opponent left. She was overjoyed. Taking advantage of the moment her opponent's mind was shaken, she threw the talisman without hesitation. Amidst the flames created by the talisman, the identity tablet on the person's waist emitted a soft white light. In the white light, the person's body disappeared. The identity tablet dimmed and fell to the ground. Emotinga reached out to catch the identity tablet, then turned around to face the 10th layer cultivator together with Qinshi. His companions were sent out one after another, so this person was already flustered. Before long, he was also sent out. Qinshi took the identity tablet. The remaining 2 8th layer cultivators, trapped in the spirit trapping formation, had just escaped from the formation when they were immediately disrupted by a series of spells. They were defeated without much resistance. The 2 people disappeared, and the 2 identity tablets fell to the ground. Emotinga heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't have much fighting experience. This time, she was fighting 2 against 5, so she really didn't have the confidence to win. Her mind had been tense the whole time. As soon as the fight ended, she felt weak in the legs. Looking at the 2 identity tablets, Emotinga hesitated. This time, although Qinshi was fighting 2, and she was fighting 3, in fact, Qinshi dealt with one of them first, which gave her an opportunity to take advantage of. Therefore, these identity tablets couldn't be taken for granted. She also felt unwilling to give up one. Qinshi smiled. Junior Martial Brother Yi, these 2 people were trapped by you, so the identity tablets belong to you. Emotinga couldn't help but feel that she was a bit narrow-minded since he was giving them away. However, she also couldn't learn to refuse, so she immediately took the identity tablets and said earnestly, "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Qin. I will engrave this friendship in my heart." Qinshi waved his hand and said no more. At this time, footsteps came from outside the room. Emotinga and Qinshi glanced at each other, feeling depressed. Why did another group come after they killed one group? The next moment, the person who entered the room startled them. It was Louis Dao. Senior Martial Brother Lu. Louis Dao was surprised to see them. Turns out you were ahead of me. Where are Junior Martial Brother Jiang and Junior Martial Brother Su? Have you seen them? Emotinga shook her head. No, Senior Martial Brother Lu. What's the situation outside? Louis Dao said. I've been looking for you since I realized the formation was broken. But I didn't see you for a long time until I came here. The other 2 Senior Martial Brothers aren't outside? I haven't seen them. Emotinga frowned. It seems their situation isn't good. The formation was broken, so they could easily find this place. However, those 2 people actually hadn't arrived yet. The 2 of them stared at her in confusion. Emotinga took out a summoning jade talisman from her Qianquan bag and inserted her spiritual aura into it, wanting to send it to Su Jingji. However, the jade talisman didn't respond at all. She sighed and put away the jade talisman. They're not here. They might have been defeated and sent out. Qinshi immediately thought of something. Was it the 5 people just now? It should be. They were also sent here. The 2 Senior Martial Brothers must have run into them outside and were defeated by them. Louis Dao was confused. What happened? Emotinga said. When we arrived here just now, 5 Jindao school disciples came in after us. Oh, Louis Dao was surprised. Where are they now? We defeated them and they were sent out. It took Louis Dao a moment to react. He sighed and said, I underestimated the 2 Junior Martial Brothers. 2 against 5, but they actually won. Emotinga smiled. They weren't familiar with the characteristics of my spells, so they were caught off guard. Senior Martial Brother Qin, on the other hand, didn't fall into a disadvantageous position at all, and even defeated one of them first. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Qinshi just shook his head and changed the topic. Since Senior Martial Brother Lu is here, Let's discuss our next step. We've been here for half a day, so we don't know the situation outside. Louis Dao said. Should we go out? Emotinga hesitated. Isn't it too dangerous to go out now? Louis Dao said. Junior Marshal brother Yi doesn't know, but it'll be more dangerous if we hide here for a while. This time, there are a lot of Zixia sect disciples, and Miwu Valley isn't that big. When they clear out all the people outside and come back to search for us, it'll be very difficult for us to hide. At that time, if we're found, we'll have no way to escape. What he said was very reasonable. The other two people pondered for a moment. Then Qinshi said, Then let's go out. Since we can't hide, we'll talk after we defeat a few more people. The two of them didn't have any objections. Louis Dao guarded them while they adjusted their breaths and recovered the spiritual aura they consumed in the fight just now. Once their spiritual aura and energy were restored, the three of them packed up their things and left the formation. Chapter 50. Now that the formation was broken, the three of them walked out and discovered that it was only a very shallow cave. If they really hid inside and didn't come out, they would have been discovered long ago, and they wouldn't be able to escape even if they grew wings. Miwu Valley was indeed worthy of its name. As soon as they came out of the cave, even with their eyesight as cultivators, they could only see things within a few dozen feet. The vast white fog hid everything in front of them. They could only hear shouts and fighting noises coming from the white fog from time to time. Seeing this situation, Emotinga took out her greenwood sword and prepared to fight at any time. Louis Dao frowned. We can only try our luck. Emotinga said. The fog is so thick, so it might not be a bad thing for us. If we only have 3 people, I'm afraid we'll be cleared out very soon. In this situation, if we have fewer people, we'll fight. If we have more people, we'll hide and take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Correct. Qinshi nodded. It'll be easier if we have fewer people in the fog. Having made up their minds, the 3 of them wandered around. Sure enough, from time to time, they came across fights of magical power. If they met other Yunwu sect disciples, they would lend a hand. If they met Jindao school or Zixia sect disciples, they would fight if they had fewer people. If they had more people, they would hide in the fog and use talismans to communicate. Then they would scatter and meet up again. If they ran into a fight between 2 other groups, they would sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. At a critical moment, they would attack and fish in troubled waters. In the boundless white fog, 7 or 8 Jindao school disciples met 10 or so Zixia sect disciples. As soon as they saw each other, they started fighting. Although Jindao school disciples had fewer people, their cultivation levels were relatively high. Both sides fought back and forth with equal strength. Just when they were both injured and the winner was about to be decided, all of a sudden, densely packed fire thorns grew all around them and surrounded them. Then, big bewitching flowers floated in along with all kinds of magic talismans. Very soon they, who were already injured and exhausted of their spiritual qi, were cleared out by these magic talismans one by one, and their tokens fell to the ground. The fire thorns retreated, and 3 Yunwu sect cultivators appeared. The leader, a tall and strong man, collected all the identity tablets on the ground. The 3 of them then left without stopping, disappearing into the fog. At the end of the first day, when night fell, Emotinga and the other 2 returned to the location of the formation. Emotinga set up another bewildering formation. The 3 of them hid inside and rested while dividing the loot. Throughout the day, they didn't kill many people head-on, but they did steal quite a lot from the muddy waters. After counting, there were actually more than 100 command tokens. Louis Dao was both startled and delighted. We've really made a profit this time. There are more than 100 identity tablets here. If we divide them, each of us will get about 40 identity tablets. Each identity tablet is worth 10 spirit stones, so each of us will get several hundred spirit stones as a reward. Emotinga calculated in her mind. Yunwu sect had a total of 300 to 400 aura refining disciples, who were in the 7th layer or above. Jindao school had slightly fewer disciples, but Zixia sect definitely had more than 500 disciples. In other words, Yunwu sect probably had about 800 identity tablets from other sections. Of course, in fact, Zixia sect was a bit stronger. Assuming Yunwu sect had a 50-50 chance of winning against them, including Jindao School, the number of identity tablets they could snatch would only amount to about 400. Moreover, more than half of Jindao School's identity tablets would be snatched by Zixia sect. So the total number of identity tablets they could snatch would be about 300. Right now, they had more than 100 identity tablets in their hands. Even if they divided them into 3 portions, it wouldn't be a problem for them to rank among the top 10 sections. Qin Shi, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was adjusting his breath. Upon hearing Lu Yidao's words, he said faintly without even opening his eyes. Today, there were the most chaotic battles. The weaker ones were all eliminated. I'm afraid we won't have such an advantage tomorrow. We better not take chances. Mo Tiange and Lu Yidao became a bit more clear-headed after being splashed with cold water. Lu Yidao looked ashamed. He immediately asked, "Junior martial brothers, how should we divide these identity tablets?" Qin Shi opened his eyes. He pondered for a moment then said, "It's all thanks to Junior martial brother Ye's special spell that we were able to conveniently take advantage of the situation. Let's give him a bit more." Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. How can I accept this? Even so, it was Lu Yidao who took the risk to scout out the enemy's situation. In addition, Qin Shi's exquisite spell made those people think they had a lot of people, so they didn't have the heart to resist. Lu Yidao was also open-minded. He admitted that although his cultivation technique was solid, he didn't have any special skills and wasn't as scheming as them. So he didn't argue too much. He said with a smile, "That being the case, Junior martial brother Yi will each get 50 identity tablets, and Junior martial brother Qin and I will each get 41. What do you think?" Qin Shi nodded. He didn't have any objections. Since they agreed on this, Mo Tiange no longer refused. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although the path to immortality was difficult and cultivators couldn't be considered too noble, not everyone was unscrupulous and only had benefits in their eyes. For example, the people she met, Lu Yidao was straightforward, Su Jingji was concerned, and Qin Shi, although cold, was also attentive. She was always on guard against others because of the lessons she learned in her childhood. But now, with Yi Xiaotian's identity, she believed they were trustworthy. After putting the 53 identity tablets into her Qiankuan bag, she also sat down to adjust her breath. Qin Shi had finished adjusting his breath, so he stood guard. In fact, it wouldn't have mattered even if no one stood guard. Mo Tiange was confident in formations. This maze was the result of her and second uncle's painstaking efforts. Once an aura refining disciple entered the formation, it wouldn't be a problem for them to be trapped for several hours. However, this was Miwu Valley after all, so it was better to be careful. All of a sudden, a sound came from inside the formation. It seemed like someone had entered the formation. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and looked at them. Each of them took out their spirit tools or talismans. The footsteps were heavy, staggering, and messy. Apparently, there wasn't just one person. "Senior Martial Sister Shen, how are you?" It was a woman's voice. It was crisp, hoarse, and full of anxiety. Mo Tiange frowned slightly. This voice was somewhat familiar. After a while, she heard the voice again. "I'm fine. I can still hold on. Junior Martial Sister Wang, how about your injuries?" "I'm fine, but my spiritual aura is almost exhausted." The two of them were silent for a while before they heard Junior Martial Sister Wang say, "I don't know what this place is. There's unexpectedly no fog, so I don't know if it's safe or not." Senior Martial Sister Shen said, "It might be the location of an immortal's cave left behind by our predecessors. It's just that we don't know if we've found it or not. We'd better look around." Mo Tiange drew her sword. Now that she had determined their position, she slowly entered the formation. Once she reached that position, she cautiously turned around a corner. All of a sudden, she was met with a spell and several pieces of wood were thrown at her. She dodged to the side and was about to brandish her greenwood sword when she heard that person's surprised voice. "Junior Martial Brother Yi? Is that Junior Martial Brother Yi?" Mo Tiange was stunned. The two disheveled women in front of her seemed familiar, when she looked at them carefully. Junior martial brother Yi, I'm Wang Qianni. Mo Tiange was gobsmacked. Senior martial sister Wang. Wasn't this the senior martial sister, Wang she met every day when she was collecting heavenly dew? She looked at the other woman. Although her hair was messy, it still couldn't hide her beauty. She looked very familiar. Mo Tiange hesitated, but she vaguely recognized her. This is senior martial sister Xinbing? Chapter 51. A group of 5 people settled down in the stone room. Qin went outside to keep watch while Louis Dao found a corner to regulate his breath. Mo Tiange stared thoughtfully at the entrance of the cave. In a place like Miwu Valley, people had to worry about sneak attacks from time to time. This senior martial brother Qin really made things convenient for others. She turned around and saw that the 2 senior sisters had already packed up, so she walked over. Senior sisters, how are you? As soon as Wang Qian saw her coming over, she made way for her seat. Junior martial brother Yi, please sit. Mo Tiange didn't stand on ceremony and sat across from them. At this moment, Xinbing opened her eyes, and her aura had already calmed down a lot. This time, I have to thank Junior martial brother Yi. If we hadn't coincidentally met you, I'm afraid that Junior martial sister Wang and I would have been found and kicked out by them tonight. Mo Tiange smiled and waved her hand. Senior martial sister, you don't have to be so polite. We're from the same sect, so we should help each other after entering Miwu Valley. Besides, one more person means one more strength. She paused for a moment, then asked, so you 2 senior sisters are familiar with each other? What a coincidence. Wang Qianni smiled and said, there aren't many female disciples in our sect, so we know most of them. Besides, senior apprentice sister Shen isn't an ordinary disciple. How many people in the sect don't know her? Oh, that was true. Among the more than 1,000 aura refining disciples in the school, only about 30% of them were female, and most of them came from cultivation clans. Women in the secular world rarely embarked on the path of cultivation. Like her, she was fated to become an immortal because of her ancestors. However, when she saw Xinbing, she thought of someone. Senior sister Shen, isn't senior sister Morong with you? Hearing this, Xinbing revealed a bitter smile and said, they were originally in the same place, but you also know that the girl is usually very lazy, and her magic is sloppy, so she has already been kicked out. This result wasn't strange to Mo Tiange. Although senior martial sister Morong's cultivation level wasn't bad, it was all because she ate medicinal pills. She didn't have much ability in fights of magical powers. She usually either ate or played, so it would be strange if she could hold on. Wang Qianni sneered. If she hadn't met those people, junior martial sister Morong might have been able to hold on. Humph, that group of scum. I'll deal with them one day. Her tone of gnashing her teeth made it seem like she had a life and death grudge. Xinbing's expression also became serious. Junior martial sister Wang, don't say these words out loud. Just keep it in your heart. One day, when we reach the foundation establishment stage, those people won't be a problem. Right now, we don't need to worry about them. Mo Tiange was bewildered. Senior martial sister, what kind of person are you talking about? Wang Qianni answered, he's the scum of Zixia sect. When they saw that we were all women, they took liberties with us. Because junior martial sister Morong was too impulsive, she didn't notice and was kicked out. In the end, only the 2 of us were left. Senior sister, don't worry. I will remember this grudge and sooner or later, I will deal with them. The last sentence was said to Xinbing. Seeing that she was so reasonable, Xinbing nodded in relief and continued to meditate to heal her injuries. Mo Tiange then asked Wang Qianni about the general situation. As it turned out, their cultivation levels weren't bad at all. Xinbing and Wang Qianni were both in the 10th layer. Morong Yan was in the 8th layer, and there were 2 other female disciples in the 9th layer. However, because they were female disciples, their strength in fights of magical power was a bit weaker. Although Mo Tiange was also a woman, to be honest, in the cultivation world female cultivators were not only few in number, but their cultivation levels were also a bit lower. Even if their cultivation levels were the same, They generally weren't as good at fights of magical power as male cultivators. There were many reasons for this situation. Among them, it was the influence of the secular world, where men were superior to women, as well as the nature of women themselves. The difference between men and women wasn't only in terms of appearance, but also in terms of temperament and habits. Women were more emotional, sentimental, and more likely to indulge in worldly emotions than male disciples. Men, on the other hand, were naturally more aggressive. Compared to female cultivators, they were more willing to spend a lot of time on spells, so it was natural for them to have a higher cultivation level. It wasn't long after such a small group of female cultivators entered Miwu Valley. They were discovered by a Zixia sect disciple, and the two groups ran into each other. That Zixia sect disciple saw that most of them were good-looking, so he took liberties with them with dirty words. With Morong Yan's temperament, how could she endure it? She impulsively wanted to make a move, but the other party was deliberately provoking them, so they could find an opportunity to defeat them one by one. Just like that, Morong Yan was kicked out. Soon after, the two ninth-layer aura refining female disciples also couldn't resist. Only Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi, who had good escaping techniques, managed to escape to this place and run into them. Mo Tiange also said with a stern expression, "Senior Martial Sister Wang, although you already understand, Junior Martial Brother will say it again. I hope you won't take offense. Today's situation was chaotic, so we were able to smoothly escape with our lives. Tomorrow, I hope Senior Martial Sisters can restrain themselves. Our strength isn't good enough, and we don't have as many people as Zixia sect. If we can't control ourselves, we'll bring misfortune to others." They didn't have many interactions with female disciples, so they wanted Mo Tiange to tell them that if they wanted to stay with them, they mustn't implicate everyone. Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi's cultivation levels were relatively high, so they understood this reasoning. Although Mo Tiange's words didn't make them feel comfortable, they were also reasonable, so they both nodded and didn't express any different opinions. Mo Tiange didn't say anything more and said, "Senior Martial Sisters, rest assured and rest. My disorienting formation won't have any problems blocking people. Besides, Senior Martial Brother Qin will be guarding outside. You two should rest well and recover your strength as soon as possible." After exiting the formation, she saw Qin sitting on the ground on the edge of the cave. His expression was indifferent. The sword with an astonishing momentum rested on his knees. He sensed her presence, but he didn't put it away. Mo Tiange walked towards him, picked a place at random, brushed her sleeves and sat on the ground like him. "Senior Martial Brother, what are you thinking about?" After a long time, Qin finally put the sword into his Qingquan bag and said, "Nothing." Mo Tiange tilted her head and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "I heard Senior Martial Brother Qin was originally a member of a cultivation clan. How did you end up like us and become an individual cultivator?" Qin suddenly glanced at her. His gaze was piercing, but after a while he shifted his gaze. His tone was still flat. "Junior Martial Brother, ye should be very clear about this. Many small cultivation clans can't survive. With only a few cultivators left, they have no choice but to become individual cultivators. I think Junior Martial Brother Yi has a deeper understanding of the rise and fall of clans than I do." Mo Tiange paused. She knew her probing was too obvious, so his words were a bit prickly. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed, so she smiled and said, "Senior Martial Brother Qin is usually a man of few words, so I'm very curious." Qin raised the corners of his mouth, as if he was smiling. He said, "I'm also very curious about Junior Martial Brother Yi. We usually talk and laugh together, but in fact, we don't seem to have much contact." The smile on Mo Tiange's face froze. Did he mean? Qin changed the meaning of his words. "We've always gotten along well, so I think Junior Martial Brother Yi is just curious. However, I think it's fine to guess some things in private. There's no need to know everything clearly." Mo Tiange didn't say anything. How could she not understand his obvious meaning? What he meant was that everyone had their own secrets, so there was no need to expose them. Originally, she was just curious, so she probed him a bit. She didn't expect this senior martial brother Qin to be so open about it. Thinking of her own secret, her expression changed slightly. She calmly observed Qin Shi for a while. She only relaxed a little when she felt Qin Shi wasn't keeping a distance from her, or deliberately getting close to her. It seemed her disguise was quite successful in this aspect. Even though Qin Shi felt she had a secret, he couldn't figure out what it was. She tacitly agreed with his proposal, and changed the topic. Senior martial brother Qin, what do you think about the matter with the two senior martial sisters? Qin Shi said, since I don't oppose them staying, it naturally doesn't matter. Senior martial brother Qin, aren't you afraid of being implicated? Qin Shi shook his head and smiled. Junior martial brother, do you want to fight for that reward? Of course. If they persisted until the end, they would get 2 bottles of ore-converging pills and 100 spirit stones. If the number of identity tokens they won reached the top 3 in the school, they would get 500 spirit stones and a bottle of ore-converging pills. If the reward for each identity token was included, they would get several hundred spirit stones. Altogether, they would get more than 1,000 spirit stones, enough for her to enter closed-door meditation until the school's minor competition. Qin Shi said, Junior martial brother Yi, aren't you afraid of attracting too much attention if the reward is too high? Mo Tiange was stunned. I have a suggestion. We have a lot of identity tokens in our hands, enough to get a lot of spirit stones. In addition to the reward for the top 3 in the school, we don't have to persist until the end tomorrow or the day after. It's best if we can be kicked out. That way, even if we get the top 3, we won't attract too much attention. Mo Tiange was stunned. Qin Shi looked at her with a faint smile. Could it be that junior martial brother Yi hopes to show off your strength, so that you can be accepted as a disciple by one of the school's elders, and become an elite disciple? His words were obviously meant to provoke her. Mo Tiange's expression turned cold. I don't hope to become an elite disciple, but I also can't do anything that would drag my fellow disciples down. Qin Shi was stunned, but he soon laughed loudly. His laughter was carefree like she'd never seen before. Once he finished laughing, Qin Shi looked at her and said in a much gentler voice, Junior martial brother Yi, please don't misunderstand. To be honest, although those 2 junior martial sisters only suffered minor injuries, they're of no help to our group. I don't think they thought they'd be able to persist until the end. As for senior martial brother Liu, I'll use the identity token in my hand to compensate him. Mo Tiange was shocked. What's this senior martial brother Qin's purpose? He's actually willing to give up the spirit stones in his hands, just to not attract attention. Chapter 52. Early the next morning, the 5 of them left the stone room. Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing were only lightly injured, which was why they could stay in Miwu Valley. After resting for a night, they were no longer in danger. After some discussion, the 5 of them agreed to travel together. If they got separated, they would use talismans to communicate. In addition, Qin Shi coldly told the 2 of them that if they got kicked out due to their lack of strength, they shouldn't complain to them. His words and actions were very different from last night. Mo Tiange felt that he had an ulterior motive. She didn't know where he came from, so it would be better for her to avoid contact with him in the future. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if she was implicated if something went wrong. Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing could only smile bitterly and nod. They were experienced aura-refining disciples in the sect, so they knew what was good for them. Qin Shi's willingness to travel together with them was already good enough. Besides, Mo Tiange already told them last night that since they were going to travel with them, they should listen to their commands. Since they were mentally prepared, Qin Shi's words weren't that harsh anymore. Today was indeed different from yesterday. They walked around the valley for a while but didn't encounter anyone else. Presumably, most of the people were already kicked out yesterday. Louis Dao continued to inquire about the situation. He had an unconventional cultivation technique that was good at hiding one's breath and strengthening one's divine sense, so he was the best candidate. Today they rarely encountered a small group of people. If it wasn't a group of 7 or 8 to more than 10 people, it would be 1 or 2 people who were alone. Presumably, after yesterday's events. It was either because they were strong or because they had gathered a lot of people that they could stay until now. They killed most of the people who were alone. Some of them were said to be famous and powerful aura-refining disciples. Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing recognized them, so they thought about it and decided not to act. In any case, they had enough identity tablets in their hands, so there was no need to take risks. The opportunity to fish in troubled waters was gone, because there weren't many people left. Most of them were gathered in one place, so it was very difficult to act. At noon they rested for a while. Louis Dao came back from scouting and told them that there were two groups fighting not far away from them. They belonged to Yunwu sect and Zixia sect respectively. Yunwu sect only had one person while Zixia sect had 6 people. After a while, the 5 of them decided to go and investigate. Since this person could fight 6 people on his own, his strength must be outstanding. If the 5 of them went, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. After flying for a short while, he heard the sounds of fighting. Weapons clashed and spells collided. It was quite intense. Amidst the flying dust, they approached the scene of the fight. From a distance, they could see the sorry figure of that Yunwu sect disciple. Senior Brother Zhou. Louis Dao was shocked when he saw that person's face. This person was actually their managing disciple, Senior Martial Brother Zhou. Mo Tiange swept her gaze over the area opposite Senior Martial Brother Zhou. Louis Dao said there were 6 people when he came back from scouting, but there were only 5 left in front of her. Could it be that Senior Martial Brother Zhou killed one of them? Those who could manage disciples were all elites among aura-refining disciples. It was no wonder that this Senior Martial Brother Zhou could persevere for so long under the hands of 6 aura-refining disciples. Among these Zixia sect disciples, 3 of them were in the 8th layer. They were really daring. Elite disciples could easily deal with several ordinary disciples, but Senior Martial Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura-refining realm. Obviously, he wasn't an ordinary disciple. However, these people's efforts were not in vain. With so many people taking turns, Senior Brother Zhou's spiritual qi was obviously running out. As long as they persisted, they could still win. The 5 people who came with them each took out their spirit tools. Qin Shi's spell had already been cast, forcing those Zixia sect disciples to retreat several steps. Upon seeing them, Qin Shi was startled. It was obvious that they were also struggling, and didn't notice that someone was approaching. Senior Martial Brother Zhou was overjoyed and shouted, "Junior Martial brothers and sisters, they can't hold on any longer. Quickly attack." Mo Tiange and the others didn't hesitate, and used their spirit tools and talismans to attack. Their cultivation levels were obviously much higher than their opponents, so it didn't take them long to completely wipe out these Zixia sect disciples. Senior Martial Brother Zhou. After escaping from the bitter battle, Senior Martial Brother Zhou wiped the sweat on his forehead and looked at them. Junior Martial Brothers. He recognized the disciples who lived with him, but he wasn't close to them and wasn't familiar with them, so he couldn't call out their names. His gaze shifted to Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi, and he was surprised. Junior Martial Sister Shen, Junior Martial Sister Wang. How come you're also here? Shen Bing smiled bitterly and said, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, we're all from the same sect. We were kicked out so we got together. She then asked him, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, aren't you with Senior Martial Brother Li and Senior Martial Brother Qi? How come? This time, it was Senior Martial Brother Zhou's turn to smile bitterly and said, to tell you the truth, we underestimated our enemies too much. Last night, when we were resting, we were ambushed. 2 of us went out, and the other 2 got separated. Later on, we couldn't find them. Since Senior Martial Brother Zhou was an elite disciple, naturally, those who were with him were not ordinary disciples. They were all outstanding. No wonder he said that they underestimated their enemies. Mo Tiange couldn't help but lament her good luck. A group like Senior Martial Brother Zhou's actually met such a fate so early. If it wasn't because she happened to be with Qin Shi and Louis Dao, she'd probably be outside now. It was precisely because Louis Dao's divine sense was powerful, Qin Shi's magic was outstanding, and they were exceptionally careful that they were able to avoid powerful enemies and obtain so many identity tablets. After that, the group fell into silence. Apart from Emotienga, all 5 of them were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, so their strength wasn't weak. Senior Martial Brother Zhou naturally wanted to be with them, but he was just a disciple in charge, so he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Wang and Shun, who joined later, wanted to say something, but they didn't know whether they were willing or not, so they could only look at them tentatively. As for Emotienga, she was actually worried about Senior Martial Brother Zhou. It wouldn't be good for them to deliberately lose. After talking with Qin Shi yesterday, she already agreed to his proposal. Indeed, she couldn't attract attention. If she persisted until the end with her cultivation level in the 8th layer, she would definitely attract other people's attention. There were 3 core formation cultivators outside Miwu Valley, and it was said that the sect head would personally reward them. Even if she had the spirit-concealing jade pendant to conceal herself, she still didn't want to take this risk. Besides, even if she didn't obtain the final reward, she still had about 50 identity tablets in her hands, which could be exchanged for more than 500 spirit stones. Qin Shi was also willing to make up for it, so she could obtain the top 3 rewards. That way, she would still have 500 spirit stones and a bottle of ore-converging pills. Based on this calculation, she could obtain more than 1,000 spirit stones and a bottle of ore-converging pills. Coupled with the bottle of ore-converging pills in her hands, it would be enough for her to enter closed-door meditation until she reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm. After waiting for Senior Martial Brother Zhou to recover his spiritual aura under their protection, Qin Shi said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhou, since we're fated to meet, we might as well go together. I wonder if it's convenient for Senior Martial Brother Zhou?" Zhou Wang and Shun were obviously relieved. Senior Martial Brother Zhou readily agreed. "Thank you, Junior Martial Brothers and Sisters. I'd be happy to go with you." Qin Shi smiled. "In that case, what do you think we should do now, Senior Martial Brother Zhou?" Senior Martial Brother Zhou said modestly, "I'm basking in your light. You must have already cooperated with me, so I'll cooperate with you." Qin Shi nodded, then said to Louis Dao, "Senior Martial Brother Liu, in any case, it'll be very difficult for us to run into other people today. It'd be better for us to just wait here. We'll be able to wait at ease while we're exhausted. It'll be a bit more relaxing." Louis Dao nodded without any objections. Since yesterday, he was already very accustomed to Qin Shi coming up with ideas. Ever since Qin Shi entered Miwu Valley, he was practically like a fish in water. It seemed like his experience in fights of magical powers was much richer than theirs. Thinking up to this point, Emotienga once again pondered this person's origins. Chapter 53. Someone's coming. Louis Dao, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. Emotienga immediately stood up and held her greenwood sword in her hand. Senior Martial Brother Zhou stared at her and said, "There are about 10 people." 10 people. It seemed difficult to deal with them. Senior Martial Brother Zhou once said that after wandering in Miwu Valley for a day, he rarely saw any disciples of Zixia sect. Jindao school had already been cleared out long ago, and Zixia sect had the most disciples. Zixia sect's disciples were most likely the ones who came. In the fog, those people finally appeared in front of them. Wang Qianyi cried out in alarm, with an angry expression on her face. "Junior Martial Sister Wang, what's wrong?" Wang Qianyi said angrily. "The people who spoke rudely to us are among them." Since they were together, they had already talked about their experiences. Senior Martial Brother Zhou frowned. At this moment, those people were already in front of them. 5 were in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, 3 were in the 9th layer, and 2 were in the 8th layer. It seemed the 7th layer aura refining disciples had been cleared out long ago. Most of the remaining people were in the 10th layer. Emotienga pondered in her heart. The other side had 10 people while we had 6. Although we were at a disadvantage in numbers, Senior Martial Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Even if he was slightly injured, his strength couldn't be underestimated. Their odds of winning were still quite high. "Oh," a rascally-looking young man stared at Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing and said with a smile, "Ladies, it turns out you're here. We've been looking for you for a long time." Why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that you're not satisfied with us? Wang Qianyi's face was completely red, and Shen Bing's eyebrows were already furrowed. Both of them were frowning and didn't say a word. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou looked at them and coldly stared at the person in front of him. Junior Marshal Brother from Zixia sect, please conduct yourself with dignity. That person glanced at them and was about to ridicule them when he realized that Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. He immediately swallowed his words, but he also didn't want to admit defeat, so he said with a smile, Senior Marshal Brother, I was just joking. You don't have to be so serious, right? Mo Tiange snorted and said, I wonder if these Senior Marshal Brothers usually joke like this with their fellow Marshal Sisters? That's really unusual. Our Yunwu sect's Marshal Brothers always treat our fellow Marshal Sisters with great respect and would never casually joke with them. These words caused the young man's face to stiffen, instantly turning the color of a pig's liver. Someone in the team immediately snorted and said, Why are you talking to them? Let's end this as soon as possible. We can still rest for a while today. Only then did the young man's expression soften. With a snort, he summoned his spirit tool. The next day, everyone was already tired of greeting each other. Almost as soon as they saw each other, they would fight. This time, the young man spoke a few words of nonsense, and the two sides were already fighting without saying a word. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was surrounded by 3 people, while the remaining few charged towards Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi. Both of them were lightly injured, and each of them had to fight 1 against 2, which put them in a dangerous situation. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was entangled by those 3 people. Seeing that the 2 of them were struggling, he shouted, Junior Marshal Sisters, come over here. Junior Marshal Brothers, go help them if you can. Upon hearing this, Louis Dao forced his opponent to retreat a few steps before approaching Wang and Shen. While retreating, Qin Shi said to Mo Tiange, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, entangle them. Mo Tiange nodded and threw the remaining fire brambles at them. The seeds filled the sky and pierced the ground, causing thorns to grow and entangle the 3 opponents. Bewitching flowers were also thrown at them, finally trapping those people and rendering them powerless to fight back. Seeing this scene, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou looked at her in surprise. Among so many people, she was the only one in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou thought she was just lucky, but he didn't expect her to also be extraordinary. If an aura refining cultivator didn't prepare in advance, it would be very difficult to avoid this trapping technique. It was no wonder she could hold on until now. Mo Tiange cautiously walked between the 3 people. She wasn't Senior Marshal Brother Zhou, who had to rely on trapping techniques to fight 1 against 3. She could only hope that they could quickly deal with the others, so they could free up their hands to help. Seeing this situation, one of the people in the team with a higher cultivation level shouted loudly, Fly up! This reminder made her opponent struggle to fly up using the light body technique. Mo Tiange's expression changed. Sure enough, her opponent wasn't simple. He could think of a way to break this technique so quickly. The seeds in her hands were almost used up, so she could only clench her teeth and persevere. All of a sudden, Qin Shi's low voice entered her ears. Don't persist. Take this opportunity to perish together with them. Mo Tiange was startled, but she suddenly understood. Taking this opportunity to escape was the best. Not only was it honorable, but it also wouldn't implicate Senior Marshal Brother Liu. In a split second, she made a decision. She took out several spirit stones from her robe, and with a flick of her sleeve, she laid them down without anyone noticing. Under the joint attack of the 3 people, her complexion turned pale, and she kept retreating. Seeing this, the other party was overjoyed, and the 3 of them attacked her together. Just when Mo Tiange couldn't hold on any longer, Qin Shi shouted, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Right at that moment, the scenery around her suddenly changed. Mo Tiange drew her sword and pointed it downwards. Suddenly, sand and stones flew everywhere. In the dense fog, several rays of light burst out at the same time. Louis Dao didn't have enough time to save her. He could only watch helplessly as they disappeared into the flying sand, and several identity tablets fell to the ground. The scenery in front of her changed. Emotienga looked around and found herself at the top of a mountain. Qin Shi and several others were standing beside her. The top of the mountain was densely packed with disciples from the 3 cultivation groups. Their appearance caused a commotion. The 3 Zixia sect disciples fiercely glared at them, then walked towards the place where Zixia sect disciples were gathered. Junior Martial Brother Yi, Senior Martial Brother Qin. Someone called out in front of her. Emotienga turned around and saw that it was Su Jingji. He hastily pulled the 2 of them away, found a corner and sat down. He then asked with concern, "How are you guys?" Emotienga smiled and said, "We're fine. We got some identity tablets, but we really can't hold on anymore today. Senior Martial Brother Su, how about you?" Su Jingji sighed. "Don't mention it. It's our bad luck. Not long after we split up, we ran into 5 Jindao school disciples, who were also teleported there. We didn't have time to inform you guys before we were teleported out." Sure enough, it was just as she guessed. Emotienga comforted him. "So that's how it is. It's really bad luck. It's not your fault." Qin Shi nodded and asked, "Where's Senior Martial Brother Jiang?" Su Jingji said, "Senior Martial Brother Jiang doesn't look well. He probably prepared very carefully and found it hard to accept. We separated right after we came out, so I don't know where he is now." He then asked excitedly, "How's your harvest? You only came out today, so it should be pretty good, right?" Emotienga smiled and said, "We're just fishing in troubled waters, so it's not bad." Su Jingji's face was filled with envy when he heard what she said. He said, "It's good that you got something. Unlike us who prepared for so long, alas." The 3 of them chatted for a while. Several people appeared from the transporting formation. They were the people who fought with them. But Louis Dao and Senior Martial Brother Zhou were nowhere to be seen. Emotienga and Qin Shi exchanged glances. They understood that Senior Martial Brother Zhou and the others had finally made it through. Chapter 54. On the 3rd day, few people came out of the transporting formation. Like the other disciples, Emotienga meditated on the mountaintop. Although the spiritual aura on the mountaintop couldn't compare to the spiritual aura in the north peak of Mount Yunwu, it wasn't much worse than the spiritual aura in the south peak. Most cultivators cultivated in a race against time and didn't waste any time. Even the sect heads of the 3 cultivation groups and the foundation building cultivators who came with them didn't waste any time meditating. During this time, Emotienga had already stabilized her cultivation realm. Moreover, after several fights of magical power, she also gained some new insights into the use of spiritual aura, so she had to carefully study them. Some things had to be understood in fights of magical power. Listening to lectures wasn't enough. Time passed bit by bit. On the morning of the 4th day, the 3 sect heads and the seniors who were meditating opened their eyes one after another. Sect head Li of Zixia sect said, "Time's up." Sect head Feng of Yunwu sect and sect head Jin of Jindao school nodded solemnly. Soon after, the 3 of them stood up and stood in 3 different directions around the transporting formation. Then they circulated their spiritual aura together and launched a joint attack. An unbearable power spread out, and disciples of the 3 cultivation groups appeared around the transporting formation one after another. The 3 sect heads worked together again, and the transporting formation instantly disappeared from the mountaintop. Emotienga looked around. There were only 50 to 60 people in total, most of whom were Zixia sect disciples. There was no one from Jindao school, and there were more than 10 people from Yunwu sect, including Senior Martial Brother Zhou's group of 4. Sect head Feng's and sect head Jin's expressions changed, especially sect head Jin, whose face was so dark that ink could drip from it. Emotienga also frowned. Zixia sect's strength seemed to be beyond her imagination. This was only a corner of the eastern side of Kumwa mountain range. There were no big cultivation groups here. Only these 3 medium-sized cultivation groups. They kept each other in check and united against external forces. If one of them was too strong, it wouldn't be a good thing. The balance would probably be broken. Sect head Li of Zixia sect remained calm and collected. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, we should count the results." Sect head Jin's face was still dark. Sect head Fong finally restrained his emotions and said, "As Brother Li said." Then he walked to Yunwu Sect's side and shouted, "Disciples, hand over all the identity tablets you got. No tricks." After sect leader Fong said that, the foundation building cultivator, who was waiting at the side, raised his voice and said, "Hand over your identity tokens one by one. Don't push and shove." "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, let's go." Qin Shi, who was sitting on the side, turned around and said. Mo Tiange nodded, then stood up and dusted off her sleeves. She then followed the flow of people and walked to the side to line up. There weren't too many people who managed to get their identity tablets. The aura refining disciples sitting on the ground with disappointed expressions on their faces were all cleared at once. There were only about 100 people in the queue. Soon, it was Mo Tiange's turn. When the foundation building cultivator took the bag from her, a strange expression flashed across his face. When he finished counting the number inside the bag, he looked at her cautiously and recorded, Yi Xiaotian, a total of 84 identity tablets. Mo Tiange saluted him, then retreated. Qin Shi, a total of 22 identity tablets. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange paused for a moment. Her heart was filled with complicated feelings. Qin Shi gave her about 20 identity tablets. Not to mention the possibility of getting into the top 3. The identity tablets alone were worth 200 spirit stones. If it wasn't because she was in urgent need of spirit stones, she really wouldn't want to accept this favor. After all, a debt of gratitude was the hardest to repay. When they returned to their original spot, Su Jingji's expression was filled with envy. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I really didn't expect you to get into the top 3 now." When he heard the record just now, he was shocked. He never expected there would be so many. This was a huge amount of money. Qin Shi, who came back later, said, "I'll be honest with you, Junior Marshal Brother Su. In fact, in order to get that reward, the two of us gathered our identity tablets in one place. This way, splitting the reward equally is better than neither of us getting anything at all." Su Jingji suddenly understood. "I see. But the two of you are still very amazing. You actually managed to get more than 100 identity tablets." Mo Tiange said, "It's all because Senior Marshal Brother Lu was there that we could fish in troubled waters. Otherwise, if we were alone, we might have already been surrounded and forced out." Su Jingji nodded. "You're right. Senior Marshal Brother Lu's cultivation technique is indeed very suitable for fights of magical powers in Miwu Valley." After successfully diverting Su Jingji's attention, the two of them smiled at each other. They were very good at fooling people. By the way, what about Senior Marshal Brother Lu? He made a huge profit this time. He persevered until the end, so he got 2 bottles of ore-converging pills. In addition to the reward in his hand, alas, he'll get a lot of spirit stones even if he sells them. Su Jingji became even more envious when he thought of the luckiest Louis Dao. Louis Dao's straightforward laughter came from behind them. "Junior Marshal Brothers, I'm really indebted to you." The three of them turned around and saw Louis Dao walking towards them happily despite being exhausted. One after another they called out, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu." After greeting them, Louis Dao first thanked Mo Tiange and Qin Shi. "I still haven't thanked Junior Marshal Brothers. If it weren't for you risking your lives to get rid of those people, we probably wouldn't have been able to persevere." Mo Tiange smiled. "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, what are you talking about? It was just a matter of convenience. At that time, I indeed couldn't persevere any longer. In fact, I've implicated Senior Marshal Brother Qin." Qin Shi shook his head. "It was just a coincidence. I just wanted to lend a hand, but unexpectedly we came out together. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, don't take it to heart. Senior Marshal Brother Lu, don't take it to heart." As they talked about that fight of magical powers, Su Jingji was especially jealous. "The three of you really don't give me any face. Let's go back and talk about this slowly. Aren't you trying to provoke me by talking about this in front of me?" Louis Dao burst into laughter and patted Su Jingji's shoulder. "Junior Marshal Brother Su, you also have to remember this. Fortunately, it was you and Junior Marshal Brother Jiang who encountered those 5 Jindao school disciples. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble." Su Jingji rolled his eyes. "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, You think I haven't been provoked enough? Louis Dao laughed again. Emotinga couldn't help but shake her head with a smile. In fact, she could be considered lucky, right? With Yi Xiaoqian's identity, she made these friends. No matter what would happen in the future, she should cherish today's friendship. When the 3 cultivation groups finished recording, the 3 school heads once again gathered in one place. Jindao School's school head Jean still didn't look well. Zixia Sec's school head Li still had a smile on his face. As for Yunwu Sec's school head Fang, his expression was no longer gloomy. Because according to the statistics just now, although Yunwu Sect didn't have many disciples who persisted until the end, the number of identity tablets they obtained was extremely high, so they could finally save their face. The disciples couldn't hear what the 3 school heads were talking about, but they soon dispersed. The school heads called out to the others, and each of them led their disciples away on their flying magic weapons. Several hours later, they returned to Yunwu Sec's square. The school head made a final announcement. Disciples, Yunwu Sec's performance in this Miwu Valley competition is acceptable, but you mustn't be complacent. You have to know that we're still far from being comparable to Zixia Sect, so we must continue to work hard. Alright, the competition in Miwu Valley is over. I'll now announce the rewards for the final winners, and the top 3 who obtained identity tablets. School head Fang frowned when he saw the names reported by the foundation building disciples, but he didn't say anything. He raised his voice and announced, I'll now announce the names of the final 13 winners. Zhou Jinan, Louis Dao, Li Rongxing, Morongzi, Wang Qianyi, Shenbing. The 3 who obtained the most identity tablets are Zhou Jinan, 92, Yi Xiaotian, 84, Li Rongxing, 76. I hope the other disciples can follow their example and cultivate diligently to strengthen Yunwu Sect. Alright, you've been working hard these past 3 days. Go back and rest. The rewards for the identity tablets will be distributed tomorrow. The disciples who obtain the final winners and the top 3 prizes, please come to the steward's hall to receive them. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief when she heard the definite results. Fortunately, she accepted Qin Shi's identity tablet. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to obtain these rewards. She immediately spoke to Qin Shi and Su Jingji, then went to the steward's hall with Louis Dao. Louis Dao patted her shoulder and said with a smile, You and junior martial brother Qin are really smart. Obtaining these rewards isn't much worse than obtaining the final victory. Louis Dao was more than a head taller than her, and he was also very strong. Mo Tiange grimaced in pain from his pat. Senior martial brother Lu, I'm very thin and weak. Don't use too much strength. Upon seeing her expression, Louis Dao hastily withdrew his hand. He then said with great puzzlement, Junior martial brother Yi, you seem to be 18 years old, right? Why are you still so thin? Your waist is as thin as a girl's. Mo Tiange hastily said, There's nothing I can do about being small. Maybe I'll grow taller in the future. Thin waist. Then I'll go back and wrap it around my waist a few more times. Chapter 55. After receiving their rewards in the steward's hall, Mo Tiange and Louis Dao chatted and laughed as they returned to their residence. Senior martial brother Zhou came back earlier than them. At the moment, he was tidying up the spiritual plants he had neglected for several days. When he saw them, he smiled and nodded at them. Senior martial brother Zhou's name was Zhou Jinan. This time, he was the one who won first place. The 2 rewards really made people envious. Because they traveled together in Miwu Valley, he treated them differently from before. Mo Tiange and Louis Dao hastily returned his greeting, then returned to their rooms. Qin Shi and Su Jingji were still waiting for them in the small hall. Jiang Shanghang's room was filled with spiritual aura, so he must have returned to cultivate. This time, it must have been a big blow to him, but they weren't familiar with him, so there was nothing to say. After chatting for a while, the 4 of them went their separate ways. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment, but still went to knock on the door next door. The door opened, and Qin Shi stood behind it. Junior martial brother Yi, is there something else? Mo Tiange looked at his hand holding the door and raised her eyebrows. Senior martial brother Qin, aren't you going to invite me in? Qin Shi smiled, let go of her hand, and turned around to enter the room. This room was different from the others. She hadn't seen Jiang Shanghang's room, but she had seen Su Jingji and Louis Dao's. Su Jingji's room was the same as hers. The bedding and praying mats were changed by themselves, and the tea set, and so on were all brought from home. As for Louis Dao, he didn't add many things. Aside from cultivation needs, there was nothing else. The room in front of her was different from theirs. The praying mats weren't things from the school, so she could feel they weren't ordinary. On the table, there was a green jade tea set, sparkling and translucent, containing spiritual aura. Obviously, it wasn't ordinary either. In the middle of the room, there was a cauldron that seemed to be a pill-concocting furnace. The room was surrounded by formation tools. Praying mats, tea set, pill-concocting furnace, and formation. Only these 4 things were added, but none of them were ordinary. She couldn't see through the other 3 things, but she could see some clues about the formation. This was a compound formation that combined defense, spiritual aura gathering, restriction on divine sense, and isolation of spiritual aura. Inside this formation, the density of spiritual aura was comparable to that of the North Peak. She inwardly speculated that based on her and second uncle's attainments in formations, they definitely wouldn't be able to create such a formation. This formation must have been created by a cultivator in the core formation realm or above. If it was put on the market, it would fetch at least several thousand spirit stones. She turned around and saw Qin Shi looking at her with a faint smile on his face. Realizing that she had lost her composure, she said, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, we've received our rewards. Let's split them now." As she spoke, she took out a cloth bag from her Qianquan bag and said, "There are 700 spirit stones here. The medallion Senior Apprentice Brother gave me can be exchanged for 200 spirit stones. As for the reward, I urgently need Qi gathering pills. Senior Apprentice Brother's cultivation base is already at the 10th layer, so I don't think you need them that much. So I think the spirit stones are yours, and the Qi gathering pills are mine." Qin Shi only glanced at her and said, "Since I said I'm compensating you, I naturally won't ask you for it. You can use it yourself. Although Senior Brother doesn't want it, I think it's better for us to be clear about it. After all, I don't want to attract attention. I came out early, but it's not just because of you." Qin Shi muttered to himself for a moment, then took the cloth bag. He took out a handful of spirit stones and threw the rest back to her. Mo Tiange was puzzled. There are about 200 spirit stones in here. Just take it as returning my identity medallion. As for the reward, you'll have to bear part of the risk when you receive it. I don't want it. Besides, do you think I'm lacking spirit stones?" Mo Tiange could only smile bitterly at this question. Looking at the things in this room, this Senior Apprentice Brother Qin probably didn't care about these several hundred spirit stones. So she could only say, "All right, I'll accept Senior Apprentice Brother's kindness today." Qin Shi nodded, then asked, "Is there anything else, Junior Apprentice Brother?" "No." Mo Tiange paused for a moment, then said helplessly, "Then I'll take my leave." Qin Shi revealed a faint smile. He was obviously very satisfied with her tactfulness. "Junior Apprentice Brother Yi, please go ahead." He said please, but in fact he just wanted to ask her to leave, right? Mo Tiange felt even more helpless, but she also didn't want to stay, so she followed his wishes and pushed the door open to leave. After returning to her room, she first took a bath, then lay on the bed in a daze. This time, she could be said to have gained quite a lot. 1,000 spirit stones, a bottle of aura-converging pills, and the bottle of aura-converging pills she already had were enough for her to cultivate without worrying about spirit stones for the next 2 years, until she reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, when she thought about Qin Shi, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. In fact, she only said a few words to probe him, so she didn't know he had secrets. However, this person didn't seem to be afraid of her knowing he had ulterior motives, and seemed certain she wouldn't divulge them. Why was he so sure? As she thought about it, she suddenly felt her hair stand on end. Could it be that her secret was discovered? Was that why he was so sure? Now that she thought about it carefully, this Senior Apprentice Brother Qin did treat her a little differently from other people. But she couldn't tell what exactly was different. She couldn't figure it out no matter how she thought about it. So she shook her head and decided to sleep first. Tomorrow, she would go down the mountain and ask Second Uncle. Second Uncle had a lot of experience, so he would definitely be able to tell her what to do. She closed her eyes and soon fell asleep. However, she kept dreaming today. First, she dreamed of her childhood. Her mother was still in good health and was cooking in the kitchen. She was only 3 or 4 years old, sitting on a small stool and watching. Then she dreamed of Liu Shan. She didn't understand the human furnace when she was young, but now that she knew what it meant, she became even more terrified. Then she dreamed of Yi Jingwen. She and Second Uncle were taken back to Xianqing School and were at their disposal. Then she dreamed of Yinwu sect. Her secret was exposed, and she was forced to kneel in front of the sect head of True Treasure Hall, waiting to be punished. Mo Tiange woke up with a head full of sweat. She felt weak. It seemed she was really scared yesterday. She patted her forehead and went outside to get some water. After washing herself, she prepared to go down the mountain. She first went to the sect's shop to get the spirit stones she used to sell formations and exchange them for healing medicinal pills before returning to the small courtyard she used to live in with Second Uncle. She opened the formation and walked into the courtyard. Before she could knock on the door, she heard Second Uncle's voice. Xiaotian. Mo Tiange pushed the door open. Second Uncle, it's me. A smile appeared on Yi Zhang's old face, but Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. After not seeing him for a month, Second Uncle looked even more tired. His face was gray and his hair was white. He looked extremely old. She finally realized that without her knowledge, Second Uncle had already become like this. With Second Uncle's cultivation level, even if he had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm, he could have found a small cultivation group and lived the rest of his life in peace. However, in the past 7 or 8 years, Second Uncle took her everywhere to avoid Xianqing School, racking his brains to earn spirit stones. In the end, he ended up in a situation where he was seriously injured. Second Uncle. Tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "Did your injuries worsen? Why didn't you tell me?" Yi Jiang looked at her and smiled. Xiaotian. Tiange, according to Second Uncle's estimation, I don't have much time left in my life, so my injuries haven't healed. Although we cultivators have a lifespan that surpasses mortals, we still have to die. Don't be sad. This day will come eventually. But, Yi Jiang waved his hand to stop her. I can feel that I only have 2 or 3 years at most. Even if my injuries are healed, it won't be enough. Now that you're in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, Second Uncle hopes to see you advance to the foundation building realm before I pass away. At that time, even if I die, I'll be able to rest in peace. Tears involuntarily fell from her eyes. Upon hearing what he said, she hastily wiped them away, took out her Qianquan bag, poured out spirit stones and medicinal pills, and said with a smile, Second Uncle, look, I won a lot of people in Miwu Valley. These rewards are enough for me to cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Yi Jiang smiled. Second Uncle always believed you could do it. Don't worry. Second Uncle will definitely hold on until that time. Therefore you have to cultivate diligently, understand? Mo Tiange nodded, but she felt bitter in her heart. She knew this day would come eventually. Ever since Second Uncle was injured, he kept reminding her that he didn't have much time left in his life. Cultivators naturally had to be indifferent to life and death, but although she understood this, she couldn't help but feel sad. 10 years ago, it was her mother who abandoned her. Now it was Second Uncle. The most important people by her side always left her. Alright, tell me about your trip to Miwu Valley. Second Uncle can give you some pointers. Mo Tiange calmed down and told him everything about Miwu Valley in detail. Finally, she talked about Qin Shi. Yi Jiang was silent for a long time before he said, that person's background must be extraordinary. According to what you said, he's so experienced in fights of magical powers, and doesn't lack treasures. He really doesn't seem like an aura refining cultivator. Unless he's not an individual cultivator, and has a high-level cultivator as an elder, or he had other fortuitous encounters. You don't have to worry. He obviously doesn't have any ulterior motives toward you from what he did. You just need to reduce your contact with him in the future. Emotienga felt a bit relieved. I understand. I won't care about what he does. We'll just continue our relationship like before. Correct. You should go back and continue cultivating. Second uncle doesn't have much time, so you have to hurry. Emotienga was silent. In the end, she listened to him and said, I understand, second uncle. Chapter 56. After returning to Mount Yunwu, Emotienga officially entered closed-door meditation. Aside from going back to see second uncle every half a month, she no longer went out for a stroll. Occasionally, when she came out of closed-door meditation, she would find summoning talismans for Morong Yen, Wang Qianyi, and even Shinbing. Originally, she didn't have any friendship with them, but after the trip to Miwu Valley, they became closer. When they learned that she was cultivating in closed-door meditation, they all came to greet her. Shinbing and Wang Qianyi even said that if she needed any help, she could just ask. Emotienga knew it wasn't appropriate for her to have too much contact with them, so she only responded politely and didn't ask for anything. Every time she came out and ran into the other senior martial brothers living with her, she was laughed at. Su Jingji was even more envious and jealous. He said that although she looked good, her skinny appearance didn't look like a man at all. She obviously wasn't as tall, handsome, and elegant as him. So why were the famous beautiful senior martial sisters in the sect so good to her? Emotienga smiled bitterly in her heart, feeling even more distressed. Men and women were different. She increasingly felt that pretending to be a man was getting more and more tiring. If her cultivation level was high, she could directly use the illusory technique and pretend to be whatever she wanted. However, she was just a small aura refining cultivator. If she wanted to use the illusory technique to deceive high-level cultivators, wasn't that just courting death? 2 years passed in a flash. Although she grew a little taller, it was very little. She wasn't considered tall among women, let alone among men. Lui Dao was a head taller than her. Qinshi was a head taller. And even Su Jingji, who wasn't considered tall, was half a head taller than her. Perhaps it was because she was too unlucky. The men in the room were all tall, making her look even thinner, coupled with her thin shoulders and thin body. Even though she had been dressing as a woman for many years and no longer looked like a woman, she was still very eye-catching. Su Jingji laughed at her more than once, saying that she looked like a man but looked like a woman. Although it didn't arouse anyone's suspicion, it gave Emotienga a wake-up call and constantly reminded her to be careful. 2 years later, when she ran out of spirit stones, she finally reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. At this time, Yunwu Sect's minor competition was about to begin. Therefore, she left closed-door meditation after her realm stabilized. As soon as she came out, the other 3 were already waiting in the small hall. In the past 3 years, Lui Dao and Qinshi's cultivation levels had become even more exquisite. Although Su Jingji was a bit inferior, he also rushed into the 9th layer of the aura refining realm and wasn't far from the 10th layer. In order to celebrate her coming out of seclusion, the group decided to go sightseeing and have a picnic. More than once, Morong Yen expressed that she missed her roasted beast meat, so she also sent a summoning talisman to invite her. Since she was invited, she naturally invited Wang Qianyi and Shinbing as well. At the same time, she also notified senior martial brother Zhou. Originally, Emotienga thought that although Morong Yen would definitely come, Shinbing and Wang Qianyi might not necessarily come, let alone senior martial brother Zhou. Who would have thought that not a single one would be missing? The group of people chatted and barbecued by the waterfall pool on the southern peak. Emotienga sat by the water's edge, struggling to skewer a row of beast meat. She used the fire spiritual art with her left hand and spread flames on the beast meat. Not far away, under a tree, there was a piece of linen cloth with tea and snacks on it. On the side, Lui Dao and senior martial brother Zhou were exchanging cultivation insights. Su Jingji was sitting next to Shinbing, and Wang Qian to join in on the fun. Qinshi was lazily leaning against a tree, basking in the sun. Morong Yen was sitting next to her, staring at the skewers while drooling. From time to time, she would ask if they were done. This group of people said they were celebrating her reaching the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. But in the end, they said that her barbecuing skills were pretty good, so they just let her do the barbecuing for everyone. Alas, when she finally finished barbecuing a batch, she wiped her sweat, then placed it on a tray and handed it to Morong Yen. "It's done. Call them over to eat." There was no need for anyone to call them. Once they saw that Emotienga had finished barbecuing, those people who were originally very leisurely swarmed over like a swarm of bees. Each of them took a handful and gorged themselves. After Su Jingji finished gnawing on the meat in his hand, he shouted, "It's really delicious. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, give me a few more pieces." Emotienga, who had just washed her hands by the waterfall, rolled her eyes when she heard what he said. "If you light the fire, I'll barbecue it for you." Su Jingji scratched his head. "Light the fire? But I don't have fire spiritual roots, so I can't use fire spells." The group of people laughed. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou said, "Junior Marshal Brother Ye's cooking skills are really good. It's much better than the ones in our dining hall." Morong Yen nodded repeatedly. "Yeah, I haven't eaten it for 2 years. I've been craving it to death." Louis Dao rubbed his belly. "This little bit isn't enough. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, barbecue more." Emotienga sighed. "Someone come and light the fire for me, okay? My fire spells are really not that good. I'm really tired after doing it for half a day," Morong Yen hastily said. "I also don't have fire spiritual roots. How about I use talismans? I have several fire talismans here. We can't waste them like this." Su Jingji immediately interjected. "Senior Marshal Brother Qin is the best at fire spells. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, come and help me." Ever since this brat met his 3 senior marshal sisters, he was extremely attentive. Needless to say, he always called Shen Bing and Wang Qini senior marshal sister. His mouth seemed to be smeared with honey. Emotienga shook her head and smiled. She saw Qin Shi's helpless expression, but she didn't refuse. She stood up and dusted off her sleeves, then walked over. "That'll do. I won't eat for free. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please tell me what you want." Emotienga naturally wouldn't be polite. Qin Shi majored in fire spells, so he wasn't half as good as her. She took out a thin blade, cut the beast's meat piece by piece, and strung it with a tree branch. She then said to Qin Shi, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, don't burn it too fiercely. If you burn the tree branch, it'll be a waste." Qin Shi nodded and placed his right palm on the meat. Flames suddenly appeared and soon, the aroma of meat drifted out. Emotienga saw that the situation wasn't good, so she hastily said, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, slow down." She hadn't seasoned the meat yet, and hadn't turned the meat over yet. She didn't want it to be burnt. Alas, it's not good to have a powerful fire spell. It's not convenient to control the heat. However, with Qin Shi's help, the roasting was a lot faster. Before long, the roasted meat was piled up to the brim, and the two of them finally stopped. "Okay, this should be enough for you, right?" Emotienga tidied up the food and pushed the tray to Morong Yen. This plate of meat was half a spiritual deer. Morong Yen cheered. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're the best." By the time she finished washing her face and went back, there was only half a plate of meat left on the plate. Qin Shi leaned against a tree and said with a smile, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you should drink some tea and eat some snacks. This plate, I think it's enough for them." Emotienga rolled her eyes. They roasted the meat for a long time, but she still couldn't eat it. Louis Dao laughed and patted her shoulder. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, who told you to be so good at cooking? Capable people do more work. Good, good, good. I really owe you guys." In any case, she could already abstain from eating, so she didn't like to eat as much as before. After eating the roasted meat, they chatted while drinking tea. The topic of their conversation couldn't deviate from the group's minor competition that was going to happen soon. Generally, there were minor competitions and major competitions in cultivation groups. The major competition was usually held once every several decades, or even once every century. Cultivators in the aura refining, foundation building, and core formation realms would participate. However, only aura refining disciples participated in the minor competition, and it was held once every 10 years or less. Although the rewards of the major competition were generous, it was too far away from them. Aura refining disciples usually paid more attention to the minor competition because it was related to the distribution of foundation-building pills. Among them, Su Jingji and Morong Yen were in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm, senior martial brother Zhou was in the 11th layer, and the others were in the 10th layer. Aside from senior martial brother Zhou, everyone else had to participate in the minor competition. Only by participating in the minor competition could they obtain foundation-building pills. Only with foundation-building pills could they build their foundation. However, they were only a medium-sized cultivation group. Every 10 years, 20 to 30 foundation-building pills would be distributed, and only about 10% of them would succeed. Among them, aside from senior martial brother Zhou, who would definitely advance to the foundation-building realm, it was hard to say what would happen to the others. Among several hundred people, it was already difficult to fight for a spot, let alone obtaining a foundation-building pill. In fact, taking foundation-building pills wasn't the only way to build one's foundation. It was just that ordinary people didn't even need to think about the other methods. Taking ancient spiritual panaceas, pouring spiritual aura into one's body through a secret technique by a high-level nascent soul cultivator, or obtaining other fated chances that suddenly poured a large amount of spiritual aura into one's body could allow one to make a breakthrough in their realm. How could these methods be thought of by ordinary cultivators like them? Only foundation establishment pills could have any hope of doing so. The more they talked about this topic, the heavier it became. In the end, everyone lost interest in talking, so they simply ended the gathering and went back to their respective places. Emotinga's heart was heavy. Although she had advanced to the 10th layer and had a 50% chance of obtaining a spot, she didn't even have a 10% chance of successfully building her foundation. She didn't forget that she had 5 spiritual roots. Emo family's ancestor, Emo Yaoqing, once said that she didn't have ordinary 5 spiritual roots, and that she had the spiritual roots of the origin, an average of 5 spiritual roots. She inherited it from another ancestor. If she had a specific cultivation technique, the cultivation speed of someone with the spiritual roots of the origin wouldn't be slow. However, after entering the cultivation world for so long, she and second uncle had searched through all the books and records, yet they still didn't know anything about the spiritual roots of the origin. 2 years ago, second uncle said he only had 2 to 3 years left in his lifespan. Now 2 years had passed, and she had smoothly advanced to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, she discovered that the path to immortality was vague, and the path to building her foundation was still far from her. Chapter 57. Not long after, the Stewards' Hall announced the date of the minor competition, and senior martial brother, Zhou, brought specific information. The minor competition of aura refining cultivators in the 7th layer and above could register. In this minor competition, the top 30 would receive a foundation-building pill as a reward, as well as spirit stones and so on. Everyone looked happy when they heard the news. The top 30 would receive a reward. It seemed the sex pill concocting this time went very smoothly. Although the foundation-building pill wasn't an ancient miraculous medicine, its materials weren't common. Usually, the sect would spend several years to concoct one furnace of pills, and the success rate of this furnace would affect the rewards of the minor competition. When luck was bad, there would only be about 10 finished pills from one furnace. After deducting the quota for 11th and 12th layer aura refining disciples, as well as some reserved for disciples with great contributions, the rest would be the rewards of the minor competition. In this way, only the top 10 would receive a reward. But this time, the top 30 would receive a reward. Their luck was really good. The minor competition was also a ring competition, but after drawing lots, they would fight each other in pairs. The winner would advance until the first place was decided. Therefore, this kind of competition made many people feel lucky. If the opponent they drew wasn't strong, it would be easy for them to get a high ranking. However, entering the top 50 basically couldn't rely on luck. There were about 400 cultivators in the 7th layer and above, and after 3 rounds of competition, only those who entered the top 50 would enter the top 50. Aura refining disciples in the 7th layer and above began to prepare one after another. For a while, the prices of talismans, medicinal pills, and spirit tools increased by 2 times compared to usual. Emotienga rejoiced that she was prepared long ago. Otherwise, she wouldn't have any money to buy things. The spirit stones she had were almost used up during her 2 years of closed-door meditation. This time, second uncle prepared a lot of talismans and medicinal pills for her. When she found out, she discovered that second uncle sold some of his belongings. Because of this, Emotienga secretly made up her mind. Even if it was for second uncle, she had to obtain the foundation building pill. Soon after, senior martial brother Zhou brought another piece of news. Zixia sect invited the 3 groups to hold a minor competition together to motivate their disciples. This wasn't the first time in the history of the 3 groups. In the past, the 3 groups indeed held a minor competition together. But this was the first time they held one together, with such a huge difference in strength. For this reason, Jindao School's school head Jin wasn't happy about it. In the end, Zixia sect's school headly proposed that Zixia sect take out some foundation building pills as the reward for the overall ranking. As for the rewards for the internal ranking of the 3 groups, the 3 groups would distribute them among themselves. This made Jin Zhangmen feel a little more comfortable. Even if no disciple of Jindao School received the reward, they wouldn't lose anything. It was just that they would lose face. However, if they refused, they would become a laughingstock, and people would gossip that the Jindao School was weak and timid. Therefore, they could only bite the bullet and agree, hoping that 1 or 2 disciples could live up to expectations. She couldn't understand Zixia sect's purpose. Although Zixia sect expressed that they would only take out 10 foundation building pills. These 10 foundation building pills could possibly add 1 or 2 foundation building cultivators to their sect. Was it really necessary to make such a contribution, just to save face? While the 4 of them were chatting in the small living room, Jiang Shanghang, who rarely came out, snorted coldly when he heard what Emotienga said. It'll look good on your face, so it'll be much easier for you to recruit disciples with good aptitudes in the future. In the long run, the benefits will be much greater than having 1 or 2 foundation building cultivators. Everyone was silent. Although no one liked Jiang Shanghang, he was still a disciple of Jiang clan. So the way he looked at things was very different from them. What he said was also very reasonable. If they became famous in the future, all the children with spiritual roots in this area would go to Zixia sect first, and they would be able to pick those with good aptitudes first. If a few of them had single or mutated spiritual roots, in the future, the gap between them and the other 2 groups would only grow bigger and bigger. This wasn't something that 1 or 2 foundation building cultivators could pull back. After he finished speaking, Jiang Shanghang once again returned to his room. In the past few years, he still ignored everyone and only focused on cultivating. Now he only lacked foundation building pills, so it seemed he was determined to win this minor competition. Su Jingji stared at the door of Jiang Shanghang's room and asked the 3 people in amazement. Did you guys see that? Senior martial brother Jiang actually talked to us. Is that true? His tone made Emotienga laugh. It's not like senior martial brother Jiang doesn't talk to us. It was just that his tone wasn't very good, and he didn't talk to us too often. Qin Shi, who was drawing talismans on the table, raised his head. Junior martial brother Su, are you ready? This question touched Su Jingji's sore spot. With a bitter expression he said, No, my big brother also wants to participate in the minor competition. My clan supports him, so I can only make do with some talismans. In any case, it's better than us. Louis Dao stopped cultivating and said, You still have your clan's support. We, on the other hand, are genuine individual cultivators with no one to rely on. Aside from the sex supplies, we don't have anything else. Su Jingji jumped up and shouted, Senior martial brother Lu, you're still talking. Last time, in Miwu Valley's competition, how many rewards did you get? Louis Dao scratched his head. It's been 2 years. Yet junior martial brother Su still remembers. Su Jingji snorted. Of course I didn't get anything. Otherwise, I would have advanced to the 10th layer like junior martial brother Yi. I really don't want to call junior martial brother Yi martial uncle in the future. How could it be that easy? Mo Tiange sighed. Senior martial brother Su, it's not like you don't know that I have 5 spiritual roots. Being able to cultivate to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm is already my good fortune. As for advancing to the foundation building realm, how many cultivators with 5 spiritual roots can successfully advance to the foundation building realm? At this point, Su Jingji also shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although I have 4 spiritual roots, my cultivation has always been mediocre, so I could only enter the sect through the Immortals Assembly. I, junior martial brother Yi, being able to cultivate to this stage with 5 spiritual roots. You're indeed better than me. The two of them looked at each other and sighed, making the atmosphere very depressing. Qin Shi, who was still concentrating on drawing talismans, said, although aptitude is important, it's not the only thing. Some nascent soul cultivators aren't geniuses with single or mutated spiritual roots. More than half of them have double, or even 3 spiritual roots. Mo Tiange had never heard of this before. Why is that? Qin Shi flicked his finger, burning the broken talisman. He then glanced at her and said, cultivators with single or mutated spiritual roots can advance through the realms very quickly and easily advance to the core formation realm. However, it's precisely because of this that their temperaments aren't firm enough, so they haven't been tested by their inner demons. Once they reach the nascent soul realm, aptitude doesn't play much of a role, but temperaments do. They can easily cultivate to the peak stage of the core formation realm, but they often fail at the inner demons during the nascent soul realm. On the other hand, it's not easy for cultivators with double or 3 spiritual roots to cultivate to the core formation realm. They usually have to go through trials, but their willpower is firm. When they reach the nascent soul realm, their lifespans are usually more than half, and their temperaments and experiences can withstand the trials. Therefore, although it's not easy for them to cultivate, it's much safer for them to form their nascent soul. The other 3 people had never heard of this before, so they were all amazed. So doesn't that mean cultivators with double or 3 spiritual roots are better? Why doesn't the sect attach importance to them? Qin Shi raised the corners of his mouth, looking like he was smiling. Now he also smiled occasionally, so he looked a bit more human compared to when he first arrived. That being said, how many people have single or mutated spiritual roots? Although double spiritual roots are a bit rare, triple spiritual roots are everywhere. A cultivation group has 5,000 aura refining disciples, but there might only be 2 or 3 with single or mutated spiritual roots, 4 to 500 with double spiritual roots, and more than 4,000 with triple spiritual roots. As long as there are no accidents, these 2 or 3 people with single or mutated spiritual roots will advance to the core formation realm. However, among these 4,000 people with double or mutated spiritual roots, only about 10 people will advance to the core formation realm. If they form their nascent soul, the former is half, while the latter might not even have one. Speaking up to this point, even he sighed. The path to the nascent soul realm is indeed much more difficult than we imagined. Those with good aptitudes can smoothly advance to the core formation realm, even if they don't have enough comprehension and effort. Those with poor aptitudes, not to mention the nascent soul realm, even reaching the core formation realm requires several times the effort. Once he finished speaking, the other 3 people sank into silence. After a long time, Louis Dao finally said, not to mention the core formation realm and the nascent soul realm, even building our foundation is a problem for us. Yes, Su Jingji said. Among more than 400 aura refining disciples, perhaps only 2 or 3 will advance to the foundation building realm. I wonder if any of us will be able to move to the North Peak next year. Chapter 58. The Greenwood Sword. The talisman's second uncle prepared seeds, spirit stones, healing medicinal pills, and several simple formations. When she finished checking everything, Su Jingji knocked on the door. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you done? Emotinga answered. I'm coming. In the courtyard outside the house, all the cultivators gathered together. Except for Senior Marshal Brother Zhou, everyone looked more or less nervous. They all entered the sect through the Immortals' Assembly. Their cultivation levels weren't weak, but they couldn't obtain foundation-building pills. It could be said that they all entered the sect for the sake of foundation-building pills. Emotinga was no exception. As individual cultivators, their biggest difficulty wasn't lacking spirit veins and medicinal pills, but not being able to obtain foundation-building pills. If spirit veins weren't good, they could make do. If they lacked medicinal pills, they could slowly earn money to buy them. With enough opportunities and diligence, reaching the 10th layer of the aura refining realm wouldn't be too difficult. However, individual cultivators had no way to obtain foundation-building pills. Cultivation groups and clans that had the ability to concoct foundation-building pills basically wouldn't sell them. Only under some special circumstances would they sell them. Even so, their prices were still sky-high. Every time they were sold for several thousand spirit stones, they simply couldn't be afforded by ordinary cultivators. Therefore, only by entering a sect would they have the opportunity to obtain foundation-building pills and possibly build their foundation. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou glanced at them and said, I don't need to tell you how important today is. I think you all know it. Your future depends on your hard work today. Let's go. The venue of the minor competition was finally set at Zixia sect. No one was surprised by this result. Since Zixia sect deliberately wanted to show off, the result was bound to be like this. Yunwu sect, Zixia sect, and Jindao school were the three great cultivation groups in the eastern region of Kunwu. The three groups depended on each other, and also restrained each other, maintaining a subtle relationship. In the past, there had been cases where one group was particularly powerful. Usually, at that time, that group would become the leader of the three groups. Judging from the current situation, Zixia sect was obviously pursuing this position. However, this had nothing to do with young aura-refining disciples like them. No matter what happened to the higher-ups, they just needed to cultivate well and wouldn't be implicated. On the day of the minor competition, sect leader Feng appeared in front of everyone again. This time, he was even more cautious than during the competition in Miwu Valley. There were 5 core formation cultivators. In the entire Yunwu sect, there were only 7 or 8 core formation cultivators in total. Most of them, excluding those who were in closed-door meditation, were all here. Emotinga frowned inwardly. Apparently, this minor competition was just a name. Most likely, it was a competition between the three groups in private. It should be known that core formation cultivators normally wouldn't appear in front of ordinary disciples. They would only be able to see the sect head during events like joining the sect or the Miwu Valley competition. However, this was only a minor competition. It would be fine if it was just like the Miwu Valley competition, but there were actually 5 core formation cultivators accompanying them. It was clear that this wasn't a simple competition. It would take about 6 hours to travel from Yunwu sect to Zixia sect on a core formation grandmaster's flying magic weapon, which was a bit further than Miwu Valley. By the time they arrived at Zixia sect, all the Yunwu sect disciples felt like their horizons had been broadened. Zixia sect was situated on top of a high mountain. This mountain was thousands of feet high and towered into the clouds. Neat and tidy jade steps stretched from the foot of the mountain all the way to the magnificent mountain gate. After that, there was a vast square and a lofty main hall. Looking down from the sky, Missouri Tienga had to admit that compared to Zixia sect's grandeur, Yunwu sect seemed a bit small. Zixia sect's square was more than twice the size of Yunwu sect's. All the aura refining disciples participating in the minor competition were in the square. But it didn't feel crowded at all. Several fighting rings were neatly placed in the middle of the square. The disciples of the three groups each occupied a corner. Jindao school had the least number of disciples compared to last time. The number of Yunwu sect's disciples increased slightly, but Zixia sect's disciples were obviously the most numerous. The right side of the fighting ring was densely packed. After that, the disciples of the three groups drew lots. The total number of people was more than 1,000, so the time taken to draw lots was very long. Emotienga inadvertently raised her head and saw that the sect heads of the three groups weren't present. None of the core formation cultivators were present either. She confirmed her guess. It seemed today was indeed a competition between the three groups, and Zixia sect wanted to suppress the other two groups. The preliminary round of the minor competition began under the arrangement of the foundation building cultivators. The number Emotienga drew was number 347, which was in the middle. It was neither good nor bad. This time they came together. After drawing lots, they went to their respective fighting rings. Emotienga's first opponent was number 348, an 8th layer aura refining disciple of Zixia sect. Her opponent's cultivation level wasn't high, and his magical power was also ordinary. Under her greenwood sword's attack, he admitted defeat in less than a quarter of an hour. She jumped off the fighting ring, feeling somewhat absent-minded. She didn't know why, but she felt restless ever since she arrived at Zixia sect. The first round of the competition ended one after another. Just as the foundation building cultivators were about to discuss how to proceed with the second round of the competition, a hall of Zixia sect, not far from them, suddenly collapsed with a loud rumble, emitting blazing flames. The aura refining disciples in the square were in an uproar, and the foundation building cultivators' expressions changed greatly. From the ruins of that hall, several silhouettes rushed out. Each of them had a defensive magic barrier over their heads as they fought. They were obviously high-level cultivators. The spiritual aura pressure produced by their fights of magical power was extremely great, making it difficult for the aura refining disciples to bear. Upon seeing this scene, a foundation-building cultivator from Yunwu sect suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "Yunwu sect's disciples, come here!" The cultivators from Jindao School came to their senses and also shouted, "Jindao School's disciples, come here!" The aura refining disciples didn't understand what was going on, so they obeyed out of habit. In an instant, the square was thrown into chaos. The cultivators who were mixed together ran here and there, trampling on others from time to time. Amidst the chaos, Emotienga saw several familiar figures among the cultivators fighting with magical powers. Yunwu sect's sect head Fang Dingyue, Zixia sect's sect head Li, and Jindao School's sect head Jin were nowhere to be seen. Apparently, the three groups had a falling out. It was no wonder she felt restless just now. Those who studied formations were more sensitive to yin, yang, and the 5 elements, so they could occasionally sense bad luck. This was really bad. This was Zixia sect, and she was only an aura refining disciple with meager strength. If Yunwu sect and Jindao School really had a falling out with Zixia sect, aura refining disciples like her would be in danger. Emotienga's face turned pale when she thought about this. "Li Mingzhang, you old fool. You actually plotted against me." Flying in the air, Sect Head Fang pointed at Sect Head Li and cursed loudly. Sect Head Li smiled lightly. "Fang Dingyue, now that things have come to this, you'd better admit defeat." As he spoke, he cast a glance at the square. "If you admit defeat, I'll leave some incense for your Yunwu sect today. Otherwise, these future pillars of Yunwu sect will all be gone." Although his tone was flat, the threat was obvious. Sect head Fang immediately bristled with anger and sneered repeatedly. "Don't be complacent. If I explode my gold core, your Zixia sect won't be able to keep its incense." When a gold core cultivator detonated his gold core, even a nascent soul cultivator would be injured. If Sect Head Fang was ruthless enough to destroy indiscriminately, perhaps not a single disciple from the three groups would survive in the square. Emotienga's palms suddenly broke out in cold sweat. She couldn't be that unlucky, could she? If she died in the internal strife between the three groups before even building her foundation, she'd really die with everlasting regret. Sect Head Li's expression remained unchanged. He smiled contemptuously and said, "Do you think we didn't guard against you when we dared to attack you? You might as well use your spiritual aura." Sect Head Fang's complexion suddenly turned blue. You dare to exterminate my Yunwu sect? Aren't you afraid that Elder Yin will come back and become hostile?" Elder Yin was the Grand Supreme Elder of Yunwu sect, the only nascent soul grandmaster in Yunwu sect. Sect Head Li snorted. "Do you think we don't know? Your elder Yin passed away 10 years ago. He just didn't dare to make it public. Once he said that, not only did sect head Fang's complexion turn pale, but all the Yunwu sect disciples in the square were also shocked. This matter was obviously Yunwu sect's top secret. Not to mention ordinary disciples like them. Even foundation-building disciples didn't know about it. It seems Zixia sect's move had been planned for a long time. Mo Tiange hid in the crowd, trying hard to think about the current situation. Since she was in Zixia sect, it was impossible for her to escape by herself. She could only wait and see how these people would deal with the Yunwu sect disciples. They couldn't possibly kill all of them, right? The more she thought about it, the more cold sweat covered her forehead. Second uncle was still waiting for her to bring back foundation-building pills. Who would have thought this was actually a trap? Chapter 59. The people in the square didn't know what happened in the main hall, but they all saw the result. When they heard Zixia sect's sect head Li's order, sect head Fang was immediately beaten down. No one knew what they did to him, but he couldn't resist at all. The other core formation cultivators were nowhere to be seen. It was unclear whether they fell into a trap or were persuaded. Core formation cultivators cherished their lives very much. Even if their sect was destroyed, they might not necessarily be willing to risk their lives. Sect head Fang was, after all, the sect head of a sect. He also knew that with his status, it wouldn't be good for Yunwu's sect to be destroyed, so he risked his life to resist. Now that sect head Fang was defeated and obviously wouldn't be spared, the Yunwu sect disciples in the square were all frightened and scared. Fang Dingwa die in peace. Today, our Zixia sect will merge with the other 3 groups, and from now on, will be the 8th Great Cultivation Group. Ahahaha. Amidst the laughter, sect head Fang fell to the ground with a loud bang. A sorrowful and indignant shout came from the Yunwu sect disciples. Sect head! Sect Headley turned his head. Ruthlessness flashed in his eyes as he waved his sleeve. Instantly, that person screamed and fell to the ground. Mo Tiange turned her head and saw the foundation-building cultivator lying on the ground. His eyes were wide open, as if he died with a grievance. There was a bloody hole in his body, and blood was gurgling out. At this time, she heard a mournful shout. Father! It was Wang Qianni. The dead foundation-building cultivator was her father, Wang Qiao. Although Wang Qianni had a foundation-building cultivator as her father, she never showed off. Usually, she only said she was Wang Qiao's disciple. This was the first time she called him that in front of outsiders. Mo Tiange looked worriedly at Sect Headley, who was still in the air. Fortunately, Sect Headley didn't want to kill him since he saw he was just an aura-refining cultivator. Under this ruthlessness, none of the Yunwu sect disciples dared to move. Several foundation-building cultivators were trembling with fear. They didn't expect Li Mingzhang to be so cruel and merciless. Wang Qiao was killed right after he shouted. Sect Headley seemed very satisfied when he saw the silence below. He even smiled. Disciples, as you can see, Yunwu sect is removed from East Kunwu from now on. If you join Zixia sect, you'll receive the same treatment as before, maybe even better. Otherwise, he glanced at the square, and his gaze stopped on Wang Qiao's corpse. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Under such a combination of carrots and carrots, Yunwu sect's aura-refining disciples, and several foundation-building disciples, didn't dare to move in the slightest. All of them acquiesced to this result. Sect leader Li grunted with satisfaction, and turned to the disciples of Jindao School. You don't have to take any chances. Now that Jindao School leader can't move, you're at our mercy. Your Jindao School is the same as Yunwu sect. From today onwards, you'll belong to my Zixia sect. If there's anyone who doesn't accept, With Yunwu sect as an example, no one in Jindao School dared to make a move. Right now Zixia sect was really too powerful. Even if the 2 groups joined forces, it still wouldn't be enough to fight against them, let alone now that all the golden core cultivators were trapped by them. At this moment, several people flew out from the ruins of the main hall. Some were carrying, some were dead, and some were alive. They were the core formation cultivators from Yunwu sect and Jindao School. Most of them were already dead. A few of them were still alive, but they were still unconscious. She didn't know what method Zixia sect used to catch so many core formation cultivators in one fell swoop. Sect leader Li turned around and said to someone, "Brother Jiang, this time, it's all thanks to you. In the future, Zixia sect's Mount Yunwu branch will depend on you." The person he called Brother Jiang was a man who seemed to be in his 30s. He wore a yellow robe, and on his cuffs, there were several clouds embroidered. This was the symbol of Yunwu sect. The man looked very indifferent as he said, "How can I disobey the sect leader's order?" From his words, he already regarded sect leader Li as the head of the three groups. Sect leader Li seemed to be very satisfied with his answer and laughed. Obviously, this cultivator surnamed Jiang was Yunwu sect's spy. Mo Tiange didn't know what benefits Zixia sect promised him to make him betray his own sect. Most core formation cultivators were proud and arrogant. If they didn't promise great benefits, they wouldn't bear such infamy. At this moment, there was a commotion in Jindao School's camp. A core formation cultivator carried a person over and threw him in front of sect leader Li. Mo Tiange focused her gaze and saw that it was actually Jindao School's school leader Jean. At this moment, sect leader Li was very complacent. He stared at the ashen-faced school leader Jean and said with a smile, "Brother Jean, considering our many years of friendship, I'll give you another chance. How about Jindao School submit to my Zixia sect?" School leader Jean looked very angry. His whole body was in a sorry state. He turned to look at Jindao School's camp, then his gaze fell on the corpse on the side. After a long time, he finally sighed dejectedly. "Do I have any other choice now? You're the knife, and I'm the meat. I can only let Brother Li make the decision." His words clearly showed that he had accepted his fate. Although everyone knew this, it was different when the sect leader personally said it. The disciples of Jindao School immediately gave up. The overall situation was set. Jindao School no longer existed. Sect leader Li revealed a satisfied smile. He raised his head and gazed into the distance. "That'll do. Marshal Uncle Qian has given his order. Since these people have been subdued, it's time to deal with the remaining problems." Remaining problems? For a moment, Mo Tiange was puzzled. However, she saw sect leader Li give an order, leaving a core formation cultivator here. He then led everyone away, taking school leader Jean with him. It was only when their flight lights disappeared into the horizon that the aura refining disciples in the square heaved sighs of relief. The spiritual aura pressure from so many core formation cultivators was really hard for them to bear. As soon as they left, the disciples of Zixia sect were already talking and laughing happily. They naturally didn't know about such an important matter beforehand. However, they were naturally happy to see their sect annexing the other two cultivation groups and becoming the biggest cultivation group in this area. In contrast, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao School were all dispirited and anxious. Although sect leader Li wanted them to submit and not kill them, they were the ones who were annexed after all. Who knew what would happen in the future? Besides, most of them were disciples of cultivation clans attached to Yunwu sect. They didn't know whether their clans would suffer a calamity because of this. If they did, their clans would be exterminated. The only remaining core formation cultivator was currently sitting cross-legged in the center of the square. Perhaps because the noise was too loud, he opened his eyes and shouted, "My sect's disciples can leave, but the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao School are not allowed to leave even half a step." Once he said that, the square immediately became quiet. The disciples of Zixia sect lowered their heads and left one after another. The disciples of the other two cultivation groups didn't dare to make any noise. Seeing that all the disciples of Zixia sect had left in just a moment, the core formation cultivator once again closed his eyes and meditated. After a long time, seeing that the core formation cultivator wasn't paying any attention to them, the disciples of the two cultivation groups went to look for their relatives and friends to discuss the matter in low voices. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange also quietly went to Wang Qian's place. Since Wang Qiao's death, Wang Qianni had been holding her father's corpse, sitting on the ground in a daze while shedding tears. It seemed like she couldn't accept what had happened. Shen Bing and Murong Yin were already by her side. The two of them tried to persuade her in low voices, but their hearts were also burning with anxiety. The two of them were also disciples of cultivation clans, and they even had masters. Faced with this kind of unforeseen event, they were afraid their clans and masters would be implicated. Mo Tiange first saluted Shunbing and Morong Yen when she arrived by their side. She then advised Wang Qianni in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Sister Wang, now isn't the time to be sad. Marshal Uncle Wang has passed away, so the rest of the matters will have to depend on you. You have to keep your spirits up." Wang Qianni's gaze wavered. Mo Tiange hastily said, "We still have to rely on Senior Marshal Sister Wang to take care of your mother and the people of Wang clan, lest they get involved in this matter." Wang Qianni took a deep breath, wiped her tears and looked at Mo Tiange. "Thank you for the reminder, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. I'll persevere." Mo Tiange nodded lightly, then no longer said anything to them. Although she was familiar with Wang Qianni, their friendship hadn't reached the point where they could advance or retreat together. Before the matter was clear, it was better for them not to have too many interactions. Mo Tiange raised her head, wanting to look for Lui Dao and the others, but she saw Jiang Shanghang first. Jiang Shanghang's expression was unsightly and looked increasingly gloomy for some unknown reason. Chapter 60. Before long, they found Su Jingji. When Mo Tiange approached him, she discovered that his expression was also very unsightly. She pulled his sleeve to draw his attention back to her. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi." Su Jingji trembled slightly. How could this be? How could Mo Tiange answer this question? She could only comfort him. "Senior Marshal Brother Su, don't worry. I think they just want to annex the other two groups. As long as it's not necessary, they won't kill anyone." Su Jingji shook his head. How could it be that easy to annex other cultivation groups? The 3 cultivation groups have been established here for several thousand years. It's not like there hasn't been a situation where one of them was especially powerful. But they've always lived in harmony. Every cultivation group has a complicated relationship. It's easy to oppress them with force, but it's not easy to completely control them. I have a feeling that if Zixia sect makes a move, blood will flow like a river. Mo Tiange was speechless. She didn't really understand the matters of cultivation groups and clans, so what Su Jingji said sounded very reasonable. He turned around and saw that Qin Shi had come looking for him. "Junior Marshal Brothers." Although his expression was calm, it was much graver than usual. "Senior Marshal Brother Qin." Mo Tiange turned to look at him. "Have you seen Senior Marshal Brother Lu?" Qin Shi shook his head. "I don't know where Senior Marshal Brother Lu is. I only saw you two." He paused for a moment then said, "But I saw Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, and his complexion looked very bad." Su Jingji snorted coldly. Of course his expression wasn't good. It was their Jiang clan who betrayed Yunwu sect. Both Mo Tiange and Qin Shi were stunned. Jiang clan? The core formation cultivator who acted as a spy just now was indeed called Brother Jiang. So that's Jiang clan's core formation grandmaster. Qin Shi nodded slightly. It seems Senior Marshal Brother Jiang also feels bad. What's there to be unhappy about? Su Jingji sneered. This time, their Jiang clan has gotten what they wanted. In order to seize the sect's power, they didn't hesitate to become someone else's grandson. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other but didn't answer. Everyone knew that Jiang Shanghang and Jiang clan weren't on good terms. Besides, the clan's aura refining disciples basically didn't know about this kind of matter. Most likely, when Jiang Shanghang found out about it, his mood would be far more complicated than others. Qin Shi pondered for a moment then said, "Aside from waiting, there's no other way. Junior Apprentice Brother Su, raise your spirits. If there are any changes, it'll be easier to deal with them." How could Su Jingji not know? He just felt restless when he thought about his family in Yunwu sect. The 3 of them found a corner and slowly waited. After a night, a streak of light finally flashed across the horizon. This streak of light landed on the square. It was a core formation cultivator. After exchanging a few words with the guards, the man walked towards the Yunwu sect disciples and said, "All disciples, follow me back to Yunwu sect. You're not allowed to disobey my order." Mo Tiange, and the other two looked hesitant when they heard what he said. Su Jingji whispered, "Could it be?" Both of them could guess what he wanted to say. Now that they were called back, it could only mean that the matter had been settled. It was unknown what they had done in order to seize power in the sect. Qinshi remained calm and said, "We'll know once we go back and take a look." Emotianga nodded. "Yes. Senior brother Su, let's go back first." Su Jingji nodded with a pale face. Several hundred Yunwu sect disciples boarded this core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon. When they came, they were restless because they were excited. Now that they were going back, they were still restless because they were frightened. Although Emotianga wasn't as worried as Su Jingji, she was also afraid they might hurt innocent people during the fight. If the fight of magical powers between core formation cultivators destroyed Mount Yunwu's market square, second uncle would be in danger. His heart was burning with anxiety, and the journey of a few hours was especially long. After an unknown amount of time, the gate of Mount Yunwu finally appeared below. When they landed on Yunwu Sect's square, the core formation cultivator shouted, "All disciples, return to your immortals' caves. Don't go out at will." Naturally, no one dared to question him. The Yunwu sect disciples lowered their heads and left one after another. Even if they were worried about their family, they didn't dare to say anything. Emotianga glanced at the foot of the mountain. Everything seemed calm, and there were no signs of fighting. Second uncle should be safe, right? When they returned to their residence, everyone didn't even have the mood to talk. They just sat in the small living room in a daze. Even Jiang Shanghang didn't return to his room. Like them, he was staring at the gate in a daze. They didn't know where Louis Dao had gone. Even now, there was no trace of him. The longer Su Jingji waited, the more anxious he became. He stood up and started walking in circles in the living room. Jiang Shanghang finally slammed the teacup in his hand on the table with a loud bang, and said in a rough voice, "Stop walking." This sentence gave Su Jingji a breakthrough in his depressed mood. He immediately stood still. His eyes seemed to be spitting fire. After a long time, he finally straightened his neck and said, "What did you say?" Jiang Shanghang said in a muffled voice, "You're making me dizzy." Su Jingji paused for a while, then suddenly took a step forward. He gnashed his teeth and said, "You still dare to talk? It's all your Jiang clan's fault. As elders of Yunwu sect, you actually colluded with outsiders. You still have the face to talk?" Jiang Shanghang's complexion turned pale, but in the next second, he stood up with a flushed face. "What does it have to do with me? What kind of people do you think the others are? It's your Su clan. It's just that you don't have the ability. Otherwise, who knows who would have betrayed you?" "You." Su Jingji's expression changed greatly. He rushed forward, grabbed Jiang Shanghang's collar, and was about to punch him. How could Jiang Shanghang be willing to show weakness? Without saying a word, the two of them started to fight. Emotianga's mind was in a mess, but seeing them like this, she had no choice but to stop them. However, she still had misgivings and didn't dare to have too much contact with them. Since she couldn't pull them away, she could only cast a pleading gaze towards Qin Shi, who was still sitting motionlessly. Qin Shi shook his head at her. Emotianga didn't understand. What does he mean? Don't care? Qin Shi sighed and pointed at the seat next to him. He waited until she hesitantly came over and sat down before he said, "The two of them are in a bad mood. It's good for them to vent their feelings by fighting. Don't worry. You see, they aren't using any spiritual aura, so they can't hurt anyone." "Really?" She turned around and saw that the two of them had finally gotten into a tussle. They were punching and kicking like mortals in the secular world, completely disorderly. After a long time, the two of them were tired and finally stopped. However, both of them were badly battered and gasping for breath. Emotianga sighed and helped Su Jingji up. "Senior martial brother Su, it won't help you treat your injuries. You should look at yourself in the mirror." Su Jingji sat on a chair and smiled bitterly. "Junior martial brother Yi, you're still telling jokes at this time? What can I do if I don't tell jokes?" Emotianga stared at the tranquil scene outside the room. "We can't do anything." Right at that moment, someone hurriedly walked into the courtyard. Su Jingji was pleasantly surprised. "It's senior martial brother Lu." Everyone crowded around him. Louis Dao was startled the moment he entered the room. Su Jingji couldn't help but ask, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, what happened? Where did you go?" Louis Dao looked at them and smiled bitterly. "I was left behind in Zixia sect, and just came back." "You?" He saw the bruises on Su Jingji's and Jiang Shanghang's faces. "Junior Marshal Brothers, what happened?" Qin Shi said, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, you don't need to worry. They're just having an argument. I wonder if Senior Marshal Brother saw the situation outside when you came back?" Louis Dao looked at the two of them hesitantly and answered, "Junior Marshal Brothers, you don't need to worry. There's no big change in the sect. However, in the next few days we'd better not go out. I heard they're going to carry out a purge of Yunwu sect's forces. We'd better not get involved." "Is that so?" Su Jingji smiled bitterly. "I wonder how my family is. If there's nothing going on, they should have sent us a message." Louis Dao comforted him. "Junior Marshal Brother Su, don't worry. Cultivation clans are the foundation of cultivation groups. As long as your family doesn't resist, nothing will happen." Although he said that, Su Jingji still couldn't help but worry. Although Jiang Shanghang wasn't worried about his family, his mood became even worse when he heard this news. Without saying a word, he went back to his room and slammed the door with a loud bang. Mo Tiange stared outside the room with a heavy heart. Sure enough, they're going to carry out a purge? It seemed that under this tranquility, Yunwu sect was really going to be bathed in blood. Chapter 61. Several days later, Yunwu sect officially changed its name to Zixia sect's Mount Yunwu branch. As soon as she regained her freedom, Mo Tiange went down the mountain to see if second uncle was doing well, and then told him about this matter. In the past few days, Yi Jiang had already understood everything. He only said to her, "Just concentrate on cultivating. You don't need to care about this kind of thing. As long as you can build your foundation, it doesn't matter which cultivation group you're in." In all fairness, Mo Tiange didn't have any feelings for cultivation groups. In the past 10 years, it was second uncle who took her to wander around, devoted himself to raising her. Yunwu sect didn't do anything for her, and she didn't have too many feelings for Yunwu sect either. In the entire celestial pole, or in the entire cultivation world, most people were this practical. Now that she was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, she could already abstain from eating. So she simply stayed in her room to stabilize her cultivation level and study formations. She hadn't had time to study the Qimen Duanjia she obtained in Miwu Valley 2 years ago. Now was the perfect time to carefully study it. During the time she stayed in her room, the influence of the annexation of the sect became greater and greater. Zixia sect sent several core formation cultivators to take over. Now there was no sect head of Yunwu sect, only the master of Mount Yunwu, and the master of this branch was precisely the core formation cultivator from Jiang clan. Of course, this didn't have much to do with Jiang Shanghang. He wasn't close to his sect, and had a grudge against Jiang Chengxian. It was already good enough that he wasn't bullied, so how could he enjoy any special treatment? Apart from Jiang clan, none of the other core formation cultivators escaped this calamity. Even their clans were implicated. Moreover, most of the sect's disciples came from cultivation clans. Because of threats and promises, disciples died every day because of this, causing everyone to live in fear every day. Normally, the individual cultivators who entered the sect through the Immortals' assembly shouldn't be affected too much, but several disciples were implicated and died. Fortunately, Su Jingji wasn't among them. Later, Mo Tiange heard that Wang Qianyi married a junior of a core formation cultivator from Zixia sect, and went to Zixia sect. Because of this, Wang clan was spared, and was no longer investigated. Mo Tiange could only sigh about this. As a woman, her body was her last asset. Senior Marshal's sister Wang was a proud woman. Although her father was a foundation-building cultivator, she was never proud, and always treated others kindly. But in the end, she couldn't protect herself. Mo Tiange recalled when she ran into Shenbing and Mo Tiange in Miwu Valley. Mo Tiange mentioned that she was verbally harassed by Shenbing. Although Shenbing was angry, she tolerated it, but Mo Tiange cursed at her. Mo Tiange also recalled that today, She was forced to marry the hedonistic son of a rich family she despised the most. She really had no control over her own fate. After a while, she heard that Shen Bing was forced to become sect head Li's son's concubine. Senior sister Shen Bing had always been famous for her beauty in the three sections. Many of the disciples of the three sects had fallen under her skirt. She was not surprised at all that she had fallen into such a situation. Beauty was wealth, but it was also a curse. If she hadn't disguised herself as a man and stopped showing her womanly side, she probably wouldn't have had a good ending today. Later, Yan's Li's sect, Sex Yen sect, Yin Yin as, Emo Xia sex Lizi cities well as she could. Emo as she said Mu's Mu. Qing Mu as Qing Mu. Apart from replying with a blessing summoning amulet, there was nothing else she could do. Several months later, the storm of annexing the two sects gradually subsided. When Emo Tienga came out of her room and saw the three of them in the small living room, she couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. What's going on? Lu Yidao beckoned her over. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, come over and let's have a chat. Filled with questions, he walked over and found a chair to sit on. Emo Tienga really didn't believe Qin Shi was fine. Lu Yidao and Su Jingji were extroverted, so it was normal for them to gather and chat when they had nothing to do. However, Qin Shi never left his room unless he had something to do. The reason he stayed outside was either because he had something to do or because he was interested in a topic. Lu Yidao excitedly asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you still don't know about the news that just came out, right? What news? Lu Yidao mysteriously paused for a moment before continuing. News about foundation building pills. Emo Tienga almost forgot about this matter. After the sex extermination, she also forgot about the minor competition that was supposed to be held several months ago. What's wrong? Are they going to hold the minor competition again? Lu Yidao shook his head, feeling extremely excited. I heard that in order to appease the sect's disciples, they're going to increase the distribution of foundation building pills and change the method of distribution. Method? What method? Are we not going to hold the minor competition anymore? Lu Yidao nodded. Yes, the minor competition this time is cancelled. Emo Tienga didn't understand. Then what method are they going to use? Su Jingji, who had been silent the whole time, coldly snorted and said, Isn't it because too many people died this time? If we hold the minor competition, it'll be too cold and cheerless, so they're changing the method. Su Jingji's mood had always been bad. Although their Su clan wasn't implicated, they weren't having a good time either. Su Jingji originally had an uncle in the foundation building realm, but because he was close to sect head Fong, he was demoted back to the clan. Fortunately, he expressed his stance quickly, so he didn't implicate other people. Coupled with Shen Bing's and Wang Qianyi's experiences, Su Jingji, who was also a descendant of a cultivation clan, was filled with hatred. Upon seeing his reaction, Qin Shi coughed and said, Junior Marshal Brother Su, it's better for you to calm down a bit. No matter what happened in the past, Zixia sect is hanging over our heads now. Su Jingji's expression stiffened, but in the end he still agreed. How could he not know this? However, his life had been smooth ever since he was a child. Aside from the Immortals' Assembly, he had never encountered such a depressing matter, so he didn't hide his emotions. Lu Yidao felt very embarrassed after being interrupted. Su Jingji's mood wasn't right, yet he was so excited. He immediately restrained his emotions and said, I heard the demonic beasts in the depths of Kunwu mountain range are getting restless again, and the small demonic beasts in the vicinity are also frequently injuring people. Therefore, the sect has decided to reward us according to the number of demonic beasts we catch in Mount Yunwu within a day. The first few dozen disciples will be qualified to receive foundation building pills. Is that so? Emo Tienga frowned. In the depths of the south of Kunwu was a dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Reportedly, there were many high-level demonic beasts there. But in the vicinity of the sect, there were generally only first and second ranked demonic beasts. The first rank was equivalent to the aura refining realm, while the second rank was equivalent to the early stage of the foundation building realm. As long as aura refining disciples were careful, they could deal with first-rank demonic beasts. As for second-rank demonic beasts, although it was a bit difficult, demonic beasts didn't know how to use talismans and didn't know many spells, so they could still be killed if many people ganged up on them. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could still run away. However, although this method sounded good, it wasn't like the minor competition, where even if they were strong enough, one of them would meet a tragic end if they met a similar opponent. But after careful consideration, it was actually a preferential treatment for cultivation clans, because they had a lot of manpower. When the time came, they could concentrate on one person and obtain a foundation-building pill. As for the other disciples, who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others? After all, if there were spoils of war, there would be rewards. Can we go together? Louis Dao shook his head. This time we won't be competing in Miwu Valley. Disciples will be competing with each other. Of course, if we run into each other inside, we'll presumably be allowed to move together. However, the chances of that happening are really low. The mountain forest is too big. Emo Tienga was calculating in her heart. This method had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that she didn't need to be afraid of being seen by others, so she could just use whatever methods she had. The disadvantage was that she had to be extra careful. After all, if she wasn't careful when fighting demonic beasts, she might end up dying in their mouths. Chapter 62. The vast forest stretched as far as the eye could see. It was verdant and lush, stretching for thousands of miles. Emo Tienga stood on top of a high cliff, silently watching. This was the southern end of Kunwa mountain range, a part of the forest. Countless demonic beasts lived here. Some were tamed by cultivators and became spiritual beasts, but most of them lived freely in this forest, cultivating and taking human forms. It was said that in the innermost part of the forest, near the sea, lived many demonic beasts that had already taken human forms. They generally didn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, they couldn't help but want to order low-level demonic beasts to attack and occupy the areas where human cultivators lived. Of course, they couldn't occupy those areas under normal circumstances. However, they could obtain a lot of medicinal pills to help their cultivation every time they came here. So they were very happy. Every time this happened, it was a gamble. Sometimes the human cultivators suffered heavy losses, but sometimes they obtained a lot of good demonic beast corpses to be used as tool refining materials. Emo Tienga had never encountered this kind of situation. She was only a low-level cultivator and had only been in Kunwu for 10 years. The last time she fought against demonic beasts was at least 50 or 60 years ago. Standing on this high cliff with her were a core formation cultivator, more than 10 foundation building cultivators, and several hundred aura refining cultivators. The consequences of Zixia sect annexing Yunwu sect could already be seen. In the last minor competition, Yunwu sect had more than 400 disciples in the 7th layer or above, but now, there were probably less than 300, maybe even fewer. Among these cultivators, Emo Tienga didn't see many familiar figures. Senior martial brother Zhou didn't come because, with his cultivation level in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, he would definitely get a share of the foundation building pills. Since the sect had just suffered a disaster, he didn't want to attract attention, so he simply didn't participate. Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing also didn't come. The two of them went to Zixia sect's main branch, and it was said that they had already decided to get a share of the foundation-building pills. Because of this, Emo Tienga felt a little better. At least the two of them weren't making unnecessary sacrifices. Morong Yan, on the other hand, came. She looked pale and skinny, standing alone in the crowd. Her face was expressionless, and her original beauty was completely gone. Seeing her appearance, Emo Tienga sighed in her heart. This was also good. At least, she wouldn't follow in Wang Qianyi and Xinbing's footsteps. Not long after, another group of people flew over from the horizon and landed on this flat cliff. They were Jindao School's disciples. Just like Yunwu sect, although they didn't change the color of their clothes, they added the symbol of Zixia sect. At a rough glance, There were only about 100 Jingdao school disciples. Apparently, they had also gone through a purge. Everyone had a distracted expression on their faces. Fighting over foundation building pills was something like that, yet none of them looked excited. Obviously, what they saw was even more miserable than what Yunwu sect's disciples experienced. The core formation cultivator leading them was a Taoist priest dressed in secular clothes. Because of this, Mo Tiange stared at him a few more times. Although the righteous cultivators in the immortal cultivation world all practiced Tao techniques, many of them dressed as Taoists, which was different from the secular world. Most of the Taoists in the secular world wore cyan, or dark blue buttoned robes, which were thick and heavy without any sense of hierarchy. Taoist robes in the cultivation world, on the other hand, were mostly beautified. Dark blue robes, buttoned robes and plain robes were layered with innate trigrams and taiji cloud patterns. Their colors were also distinguished, making them look elegant yet dignified. Compared to the Taoists in the secular world, Taoists appeared even more elegant and graceful. Therefore, they rarely wore secular Taoist robes because they couldn't show the temperament of cultivators. The Taoist in front of her was obviously a core formation cultivator, but he didn't care about what he wore at all. It was obvious that he had a firm Tao heart. Once this person arrived, the current branch master of Yunwu Mountain greeted him enthusiastically. Senior Marshal Brother Lin, long time no see. This Taoist didn't give him any face. He only let out a soft humph, then closed his eyes to rest. Branch Master Jiang was snubbed, so he looked a little embarrassed. Mo Tiange saw that some of the Yunwu sect disciples, such as Su Jingji, were secretly pleased. Jiang Shanghang, on the other hand, looked annoyed. It seemed he couldn't bear to see his elder's behavior. He stared at a cultivator next to Branch Master Jiang, hatred flashing across his face. Mo Tiange realized that person was Jiang Chengxian, a disciple of Jiang clan who once bullied her. This Jiang Chengxian seemed to be Branch Master Jiang's direct descendant. He always followed Branch Master Jiang, and there was a complacent expression on his face. Although Mo Tiange wasn't close to Jiang Shanghang, upon seeing this scene, she still somewhat despised Jiang Chengxian. He was a hedonistic son of a rich family who relied on his blood relationship with his elder to commit outrages. He didn't concentrate on cultivating and didn't have any real skills. It was no wonder Jiang Shanghang didn't like him. After a while, another group of people flew over from the horizon. The number of people was much more than the number of their two groups. They were Zixia sect's disciples. The cultivator who led Zixia sect's group was rather good-natured. He was also indifferent to Branch Master Jiang, but he was very polite to that Taoist. After the three of them talked for a while, they each used their magic weapons. In an instant, a transporting formation appeared out of thin air. It seemed to be the same technique as the one in Miwu Valley. Presumably, it had been used to test the disciples before. All disciples go in one by one. No pushing. After experiencing the calamity that befell their sect, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jingdao school were naturally quiet. On the other hand, Zixia sect's disciples were beaming with joy and rushed to go in first. The disciples of the other two groups also didn't care and just waited. Mo Tiange looked left and right. Among her fellow martial brothers, Louis Dao was itching to try. Su Jingji had a calm expression. Qin Shi still had a calm expression, and Jiang Shanghang had a deep frown on his face. She touched her face and felt that it was a bit stiff, so she slowed down her breathing and adjusted her mentality. She was determined to obtain the foundation building pill. In the future, if she couldn't stand Zixia sect's way of doing things, she could find an excuse to leave the mountain and never come back. Zixia sect didn't have time to care about a low-level disciple. Before that, it would be best if she could obtain the foundation building pill in the sect and build her foundation. Otherwise, with only her aura refining cultivation level and second uncle's lifespan approaching its end, she wouldn't dare to casually leave. As her imagination ran wild, she suddenly noticed that Su Jingji, who was the closest to her, seemed to be trembling. Mo Tiange called out in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother Su?" Su Jingji turned his head. His face was so pale that he was sweating profusely. His voice was also trembling slightly. Emotinga sighed. We haven't gone in yet. Don't collapse. Upon hearing what she said, Su Jingji hastily wiped his sweat and pretended that nothing had happened. Junior Marshal Brother Yi doesn't need to worry. Even if I worry, I won't be able to, Emotinga said. You have to be alert. This forest is very dangerous, and we can't travel together. Su Jingji nodded. After a long time, he seemed to still be in a bad mood. He whispered to her, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'm really worried. Our three groups obviously have a grudge against each other. If we go into the forest like this, won't there be some kind of conflict? Emotinga was puzzled. Why? Su Jingji was silent for a long time. All of a sudden he said through clenched teeth, If I run into that Jiang Chengxian, if I can clean him up I'll. A fierce look flashed across his face. She knew what he meant. Emotinga was startled. She turned her head around and saw that no one was paying attention to them. She then said in a low voice, Senior Marshal Brother Su, you mustn't talk nonsense. You're too nervous. Su Jingji closed his eyes and nodded. He then wiped the sweat on his face and said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi is right. Right after he said that, he closed his eyes to rest, adjusting his breath and calming his mind. Emotinga pondered for a moment, then took out something from inside her robe and handed it to him. Senior Marshal Brother Su, this is a heart-calming talisman. If you can't control yourself, just stick it on your body. Su Jingji opened his eyes. Without saying anything, he accepted the talisman and said, Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Emotinga smiled. She no longer said anything and just stared at the transporting formation. In just a short while, almost all the Zixia sect disciples had left. She composed herself, then walked towards the transporting formation. Chapter 63. The transporting formation shone brightly. Without any hesitation, Emotinga slapped a defensive talisman on her body. This time, it was different from Miwu Valley. No matter what, Miwu Valley had been dealt with by the seniors of the three sections. Although there were still demonic beasts, there were only a few left. Moreover, there were some restrictions set up in the valley. As long as the disciples had the medallions, they wouldn't die. But in this forest, it was hard to say. If they really teleported to the front of the demonic beasts and got bitten, it would be fatal. Moreover, there was a turbulent undercurrent between the disciples of the three sections. In addition, there were some people who would forget what was right for the sake of profit. They might really lose their lives. Because she'd long anticipated that this trip would definitely be dangerous, she deliberately used some things to exchange with Qin Shi for some talismans. A while ago, Qin Shi had been practicing drawing talismans. Although he lost a lot of his talismans, he also made quite a few finished ones. Since he didn't like them, he said he had a lot left, so the other three people exchanged a lot of talismans with him. Emotinga didn't have many spirit stones left, so she used some materials to exchange with him. He didn't really care because he dabbled in both pill concocting and tool refining, so he accepted everything she offered. Emotinga was somewhat worried about preparing for the trial this time. She wasn't a wealthy cultivator, and all the spirit stones she needed for cultivation were obtained through rewards or transactions. Unfortunately, she didn't have a good aptitude, so the amount of spirit stones she needed to cultivate was quite a lot. It turned out that second uncle had sold his own belongings to prepare talismans and pills for her during the minor competition of the three sects. She really didn't have any other belongings. There were only about 100 or so spirit stones left, which were reserved for laying formations. There were also some spiritual plants, spiritual objects, and other materials, but most of them had already been exchanged for spirit stones, so the remaining ones couldn't be sold for much money. There were also too few talismans, so they couldn't be exchanged for spirit stones. In addition, there were a bunch of unknown things. Some of them were recognized by Qin Shi, so he exchanged them for talismans. As for the rest, he didn't know what they were. She remembered that she had obtained a bead from the man of the Yin clan. It was about the size of a child's fist. She could feel the surging spiritual qi in it, but no one could recognize what it was. In this way, only the spiritual weapons were still valuable. Most of them were obtained from the man from the clan 3 years ago, so she didn't dare to sell them. However, this wasn't something she needed to worry about right now. At the very least, she had made sufficient preparations for this test. Once she was transported into the forest, Emotienga immediately looked around. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any demonic beasts. She heaved a sigh of relief and took a step forward. The next moment, she missed her footing and fell straight down. She hurriedly used the light body technique, found a foothold and leaped up. This was a steep slope. Because there were too many vines, it looked like solid ground in front, but it was actually just vines attached to it. She slapped her forehead. It was really a false alarm. She had observed the surroundings, but had forgotten to look under her feet. It seemed that she would have to pay more attention in the future. He was surrounded by dense trees and vines that crawled everywhere. Beneath his feet was a thick layer of dried leaves. It was very difficult to find a path. From inside her robe, Emotienga took out a jade slip engraved with a map of this place. However, this map was too rough, and there was no reference nearby, so she simply couldn't find it. She could only give up. She carefully restrained her breath, took out her greenwood sword, and walked through the forest. There was an advantage to being here, and that was that she cultivated a wood-attributed cultivation technique. In this forest, the wood chi was dense, and the power of her cultivation technique would be even greater. Suddenly, she felt a spiritual aura movement behind her. Emotienga, who had been observing her surroundings attentively, immediately moved. She blocked with her greenwood sword and turned around to see her opponent. It was actually a brightly colored flat-headed demonic snake. In an instant her hair stood on end. Even though she considered herself bold, she really wanted to vomit when facing such a snake. But now wasn't the time to vomit. This demonic snake's breath wasn't weak. If she didn't concentrate and died under its mouth, it would be even more disgusting. This snake was more than 10 feet long, as thick as the mouth of a bull, with a flat head and a thin tongue. Its cold and gloomy eyes were directly staring at her. Judging from the breath it emitted, it was a first-ranked demonic beast. In an instant, the snake jumped up and spat black venom towards her. At this time, the defensive talisman on her body took effect. The venom fell off before it could touch her body. After this attack, the defensive barrier on her body shook and was about to break. Emotienga didn't dare to be careless, so she took out another defensive talisman and slapped it on her body. Then she took out her greenwood sword and attacked the snake's weak point. This demonic snake was very agile. It moved as fast as lightning. As it stretched and shrank, it tangled with greenwood sword. Emotienga carefully controlled greenwood sword while taking out a handful of seeds from her chinkuan bag. Taking advantage of the fact that the snake was tangled with greenwood sword, she threw them out. The seeds fell on the snake's body. One by one, they grew into fire thorns, firmly entangling the demonic snake. She calmed down a little, but in the next second, she was so surprised that she almost shouted. The demonic snake stretched and shrank its body. The fire thorns entangling its body couldn't pierce its skin at all. Instead, it swung its tail and sent the thorns flying. Emotienga's expression turned grave. The scales on this snake's skin were unexpectedly so hard that the thorns of the fire thorns couldn't pierce through. The demonic snake dodged greenwood sword and suddenly turned its head towards her. The tip of its tongue spat out wasn't venom, but fog. Emotienga felt dizzy. She was shocked. This must be poisonous fog. She didn't dare to be careless. While holding her breath, she took out a medicinal pill from her chinkuan bag and threw it into her mouth. As the medicinal power of the refreshing pill spread, her mind immediately became clear. She didn't dare to continue entangling with the snake, so she took out a talisman and threw it at the snake's body. A pillar of water soared into the sky and poured on the snake's body. Soon after, it froze into ice, and the demonic snake's body immediately slowed down. Greenwood sword stabbed down. With a pu sound, the sword finally pierced through its scales and firmly nailed it 7 inches from its head. The demonic snake twisted a few times, but it couldn't break free from the ice or the greenwood sword. In the end it stopped breathing and stopped moving. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief. She retrieved her greenwood sword and carefully wiped it clean. She regretfully looked at the ice on the demonic snake's body. This freezing talisman wasn't cheap. This forest was really dangerous everywhere. It was only a snake, but it actually put her in such a dangerous situation, and even made her use an freezing talisman. Facing the snake's corpse on the ground, Emotienga was in a dilemma. During this trial, the elders of the school clearly told her to bring back the demonic beast's corpse. However, this snake looked really disgusting, so she couldn't do anything about it. After hesitating for a while, she took out a leather pouch from her Qianquan bag. With a flick of her greenwood sword, she picked up the snake's corpse, fastened the mouth of the pouch, and threw it into her Qianquan bag. Once she finished doing all this, she once again restrained her breath, carefully identified her direction, and went out of this forest. In the dense forest, a clear brook flowed through an open space in the forest, meandering downwards. Under the nourishment of this brook, the grassland on both sides was lush, and the wildflowers were brilliant. It was indeed a beautiful scene in the wilderness. However, in this beautiful scene, there were two people who ruined it. One of them was wearing purple robes, and the other was wearing yellow robes. Their cuffs were embroidered with the same symbol. The two of them fiercely glared at each other. The purple-robed youth snorted and said angrily, "Jindao School's disciple, you actually dared to mount a sneak attack on me?" The yellow-robed middle-aged cultivator's expression didn't change. He said faintly, "Yellow-haired brat, so what if I mount a sneak attack on you?" Angered by his unmoved attitude, the youth's face twisted. I'm a disciple of Zixia sect's main branch. Aren't you afraid of being punished by your school?" The middle-aged cultivator smiled faintly. "If I did everything cleanly, who would be able to trace it back to me?" The youth was seething with anger. Presumably, he didn't have enough experience, and hadn't experienced any setbacks in his cultivation, so he was easily provoked. He immediately manipulated the spirit tool in his hand, and rushed towards the middle-aged cultivator. The middle-aged cultivator cautiously took a step back. While manipulating the spirit tool, he secretly took out a talisman. Both of them were in the 10th layer. For a moment, they were evenly matched as they fought back and forth. Right at this moment, another person came out of the forest. This time, he was wearing black robes. When he saw the two people fighting, his expression changed. After a long time, he finally took out an object from his Qianquan bag and threw it towards one of them. Following the sound of the brook, several spiritual aura fluctuations attracted her attention. She carefully hid her tracks and walked towards the place where the fight was taking place. On the meadow beside the brook, two disciples from Zixia sect and Jindao school were fighting. In the corner of the forest, a Yunwu sect disciple, with a ferocious expression, threw the spirit tool in his hand. "Ah!" With a blood-curdling scream, that Zixia sect disciple lay in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect both heaved sighs of relief. The two of them didn't fight or talk. They just divided the Zixia sect disciple's belongings, burned his corpse with a fire, and then went their separate ways. Emotienga hid herself in the forest, drenched in cold sweat. What Su Jingji was worried about finally happened. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect, who harbored hatred in their hearts, killed the lone Zixia sect disciple to vent their hatred. She could imagine what would happen next. Those who killed Zixia sect disciples couldn't help but attack again. If they attacked too many times, Zixia sect disciples would discover that their fellow disciples were killed. In their anger, they would retaliate against the two groups. The disciples of the three groups would then fight each other, resulting in countless casualties. This trial was indeed full of dangers. Not only did she have to guard against the demonic beasts in the forest, but she also had to worry about other cultivators. After spending a long time to calm down, Emotienga once again set foot on the road. Even if she was worried, it was useless. She could only carefully avoid them, because the formation at the exit would only open after one day, and she was determined to obtain the foundation building pill. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.